Our main guy was bullied his whole life because he couldn't awaken any magic. Even his girlfriend dumped him and hooked up with someone else. But during one of those bullying sessions, he threw a single, basic punch that completely knocked the guy out cold. Everyone there was dead silent. It turns out, during his awakening ceremony, our hero had already left the continent's top mages speechless, because he had actually awakened shadow magic. This dark power is the ultimate nightmare for the entire world. On top of that, he trained his physical body like a beast, making both his magic and physical strikes absolutely lethal. Nobody could believe this kind of power belonged to a kid who was only 10 years old. This earned him a direct ticket to the Academy's elite class, making him the absolute genius among geniuses. You see, this boy grew up on a continent ruled by the Holy Imperial Alliance, where the Moon Goddess Ausia is worshipped as the supreme deity. But behind that peaceful mask, out in the distant borderlands, legends of ancient bloodlines long forgotten still linger. And it looks like this kid is a huge part of that secret. Right on his birthday, his mother suddenly told him she would teach him divine arts. Hearing that, he could barely hide his excitement. With that kind of power, at least he wouldn't get pushed around while hunting anymore. But the joy didn't last long before he got hit with a reality check. His mother emphasized that learning divine arts was no walk in the park, and not just anyone on this continent has the right to touch it. Every bit of divine arts is under the iron grip of the Holy Church. They have set up countless barriers, claiming it is to stop evil forces, but really, it is just to hoard all the power for themselves. To step through that door, the first requirement is to fully understand the meaning of the ancient language. It is a language used like a protective lock. As she said this, her voice suddenly changed, and she spoke a string of strange sounds he had never heard before. And the final line rang out clearly: "Power is only for those who are truly strong." What no one expected was the boy reflexively opening his mouth and answering in that exact same language, and what he said was even more shocking. True strength belongs to those who possess wisdom. In that moment, his mother was stunned, silent. She couldn't understand how her son could know the ancient language, but he just pointed to an old, forgotten book in the corner and said he learned it from there. Her expression completely shifted, a mix of joy and pure shock. She slowly sat down and revealed the truth. That book is the Holy Scripture of Goddess Ausia, containing the 7 tales of divine arts and the ancient language he just spoke. The boy was getting more confused by the second. He had definitely looked at that book in the attic before, but he couldn't understand a single word back then. So why could he read it now? The answer was simple. He had just passed through the first door. Only those recognized by the goddess can understand the scripture. In other words, he had been chosen. That very night, the most important ritual began. His birthday gift was no longer just a simple promise. It became his chance to enter the goddess's palace, where his destiny would be changed forever. Not long after the ritual started, a gentle voice rang out, asking him if he hungered for power. He didn't hesitate for a second, just honestly admitted it. And that raw honesty opened the path to the next step. The space around him shifted, and divine statues began to appear. This was the awakening ritual of the divine arts. He saw many different paths ahead: healing, punishment, defense, judgment, and prophecy. And there was one mysterious option that hadn't even taken shape yet. Strangely, there were more choices than usual, but he didn't have time to overthink it. The only thing on his mind was the burning desire to become strong enough to protect his mother, who had raised him all on her own. So, he made his choice: wisdom. The voice seemed to agree, but right then, an abnormal interference crashed in. The power meant for him veered off course, pointing toward a convergence point far beyond the 6 statues. A 7th statue appeared, representing the dark side of the moon. The laws of the world are clear. Everything needs balance, and any power that goes beyond what is expected comes with a heavy price. While the ritual continued, his mother suddenly looked at her son in pure terror. His face began to be swallowed by shadows, slowly twisting and distorting. He was turning into a bizarre creature with a dark aura that would send shivers down anyone's spine. At that exact moment, Richard's eyes snapped open. He was staring at a bizarre scene, a dark figure standing under a massive, looming moon. As for him, he was floating in a bottomless void with no support and no sense of direction. A faint, blurry voice whispered in his ear, calling out his name. It made the air turn bone-chillingly cold. Back in the real world, Alani screamed in a panic, "My son!" But before she could finish, her legs gave out and she collapsed. Her voice trembled with pain and utter disbelief. How could this happen? Why did it turn out like this? In the middle of the chaos, she began to realize something was terribly wrong. What's happening right now? This might not be Alusha's enlightenment at all. Alani's expression shifts instantly, her gaze turning ice cold. Without a second of hesitation, she steps forward. Her palms crackle with bolts of electricity as she decisively summons her power. Standing her ground, she funneled every drop of mana into her hands. As her divine magic took shape, any trace of fear vanished, replaced by a cold determination to strike. She forced those gloomy streaks of life energy to converge, hurling them straight toward that moon. But a chilling voice echoed, confirming her worst nightmare. It really is a creature of darkness. Hearing Richard's name, Alani froze. A splitting headache suddenly hit her, forcing her to grit her teeth in agony. Then, everything suddenly fell silent. The space returned to normal, but this eerie quiet only made her feel more uneasy. Alani took a deep breath, already knowing the answer. There was no mistake. That chaotic energy had reached even the domain of the Moon Goddess. Richard was still lying there before her eyes, showing no signs of waking up. His condition was more dangerous than ever. Alani gritted her teeth as memories of the magical world flooded back. Between countless dimensions, shadow races wander the void. They never stop searching, never stop invading, slowly corroding everything they touch. A long time ago, the continent of Athen was overrun by them. They fed on life force and mana. They used deceptive tactics to twist human minds, turning those who believed in divine magic into tools for spreading chaos. Eventually, an era collapsed in blood, and it wasn't until the Holy Alliance and the Moon Goddess joined forces that the invasion was finally pushed back. But no one expected that after all these years, even Alusia would be tainted. Alani looked at Richard, her heart tightening in her chest, because now he had become a coordinate, an anchor for the next invasion. He was like a beacon guiding the darkness. If this continues, there are only two paths for him. Either he'll be torn apart by the clashing energies, or the strongest shadow creature will take over his body. He would lose himself forever. Outside, the moonlight remained cold and indifferent. Alani clenched her fists. Was this her punishment? If she were still the high priestess, if the ritual hadn't gone wrong, none of this would be happening. She couldn't let her son be swallowed by the dark. Alani bolted, frantically tearing the room apart. She was looking for something. Where was it? Where could it be? Finally, as she yanked open a drawer, she found it. An old letter, worn down by time. But the moment she opened it, it surged with mana. The words on the paper glowed clearly, as if they had just been written. Outside, the light flared up, resonating with the name written in the letter. It was a name that touched the very laws of the world. Alani stood up, her gaze finally steady. She knew that person had felt it. Her memories pulled her back 10 years, to a time before everything fell apart. Amidst the dust and the pursuing soldiers, a familiar voice rang out. Alani, this place is safe for now, but time is running out. I'll handle the enemies. You have to live. Back then, she was panicking, gasping for air, and shaking her head frantically. No, I can't leave you alone, but Gadon cut her off. There's no more time. He pulled her into a tight hug, his voice low but firm. Take good care of our son. Alani's hands gripped his shoulders, wanting to hold on, but the words were stuck in her throat. Godon's voice grew heavy, every word etching itself into her mind. One day, the boy will carry the demon blood of the Achimandar family. Let him take this name. If the day comes when you can tell him his father is me, Godon Isaiah, Saitanisoria, Achimandar, and raise him to be a real man. As he finished speaking, a blinding flash of light erupted. He looked up as if pleading with a higher power. Lend me the power of the moonlight. Reality snapped back, and Alani gritted her teeth. For 10 years, she had hidden here with her son, but now, nowhere was safe. Without a moment's doubt, she summoned her power. Her voice carried the authority of a supreme high priestess. In an instant, light flooded the building, washing away every trace of danger. Alani pulled Richard into a tight embrace, her voice trembling with relief. You're awake. The boy winced, his head feeling like it was being hit by a hammer as he asked. What happened, Mom? I remember seeing a full moon. Before he could finish, Alani gently cut him off. It's okay now, everything is over. But Richard's eyes suddenly shifted, looking at her in surprise. Alani gave him a gentle smile, not hiding anything. Don't be afraid. This is your mother's true form. Richard slowly began to remember, his voice still shaky. I chose wisdom. The statue of the seventh goddess appeared. And then everything went blurry. But I remember being pulled somewhere else, a completely different space. It was suffocating, cold, and smelled of death. The moon there only said one thing. Like two sides of the same coin, I received wisdom. Hearing this, Alani froze. Her son had truly touched the boundary of the ultimate truth, the very thing she had always feared. She held him close, silently promising to protect him until the very end. The journey ahead for them would be filled with danger and mystery. But with a mother's love and power, she believed she could overcome anything to protect her little boy. Outside, the moonlight seemed to soften, shining down like a shield over the small house in the dead of night. Everything was just beginning, and the destiny of Richard and the Achamander family would soon be revealed in the days to come. Honestly, she had never heard of such a power existing in any awakening ritual before. Richard continued, "Even though my mind was hazy at the time, I remember those words very clearly." Alani bowed her head, murmuring as if she were piecing together scattered fragments of her memory. Could it be? But before she could think any deeper, she was pulled back by Richard's voice. He spoke in a low tone, saying, "I feel like I can see through everything much better now. My body feels stronger than before. I can see further. And I can hear more clearly. It is as if the world is no longer hidden from me." In Alani's heart, a complex feeling suddenly surged. Gordon's words from years ago seemed to echo back to her. This child is the one who carries the Amaner bloodline, but she quickly suppressed those thoughts and gave him a gentle smile. "All right, you do not need to overthink it right now. I am just glad you are safe." Then her voice slowed down. "There is something I need to tell you, Richard. You are 10 years old now, and you have the right to know." The boy's eyes immediately lit up, thinking it was another surprise. He asked if his mom had prepared another birthday gift for him. Alani shook her head slightly, her voice soft but deep. "It is about your father." The smile on her lips trembled slightly as she asked, "Do you want to meet your father?" Richard was dazed and asked, "Huh?" He still did not understand what was happening. "Is my father not him?" Alani looked him straight in the eyes and finally told him the truth she had kept hidden for 10 years. "I am sorry, I have kept this from you for too long. Your father is still alive." Her voice began to choke up. "Because so many things happened, we were forced to be apart. But if you agree, I believe it won't be long before you meet him. The person your father sent should be arriving soon." Richard remained silent for a moment before slowly looking up, his gaze strangely calm. "Mom, do you want to see father?" Alani paused, not knowing how to answer. But Richard only gave a faint smile, his voice simple yet firm. "As long as you want to, then I want to meet him too." His eyes sparkled without a hint of hesitation, which touched Alani deeply. She pulled her son into a tight hug, tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, my son." But in that warm moment, Gordon's shadow reappeared in her mind, and a cold thought began to surface. Perhaps just like back then, the time she could stay by his side to protect him was running out. A few days later, in a peaceful rice field, a young man suddenly looked up toward the distance, sensing that something was wrong. The person next to him asked in confusion, "Who just entered the village?" His face immediately darkened because before them were soldiers in heavy armor marching in. The villagers began to stir in panic. Heavy armored cavalry. Why would they show up in such a remote place like this? A man stepped forward, a cold aura surrounding him. It was Modres. His voice rang out with crushing pressure. "You there, answer me." The villager replied tremblingly, "Yes, sir." The sword in Modres's hand was slowly raised, the sharp cold blade reflecting the light. His voice dropped low, carrying a clear, murderous intent. "Does anyone know where Alani is?" In an instant, the scene turned into chaos. Everything was overturned as people fell and ran in panic. No one could keep their cool. Biru fell flat on the ground and shouted in a frantic, panicked voice, "Who is Alani? Who the hell is Alani? I don't know her." The people around him also hurriedly chimed in, saying they had never heard of an Alani and that no one by that name lived in this small village. But right at that moment, someone else spoke up in a tense voice. "That is impossible, Captain. The command signal definitely came from the direction of this village. That commander couldn't have been wrong." Hearing that, Modres's eyes immediately turned cold. He gave a short reply and then spurred his horse forward, his voice devoid of any emotion. "If that is the case, the only way is to wipe this place out. Search every inch." At that exact moment of tension, a figure suddenly appeared, and a voice rang out decisively. "Stop." Alani stepped out, her steps slow but firm, her calm gaze looking straight ahead. "I am here." The villagers immediately erupted in whispers. "It is Alani. Why did she come out here?" A soldier immediately barked, "Stay right there. Do not move." But Modres raised his hand to stop him, his voice low, "Do not be disrespectful." He pulled the reins to stop his horse, then unexpectedly jumped down and bowed deeply. "Greetings, my lady. I am Modress, a close knight under Lord Gordon. I have come here by his command." Hearing that, Alani was stunned, while Modres continued, "We have come to take you back, my lady." Right then, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the distance. The villagers were running and calling out to each other. "Hurry up! Something is happening at Little Richard's house. I can't believe the cavalry found their way there. Did Alani do something wrong? We haven't seen her for the past few days." Biru squeezed through the crowd, trying to get to the front. "Out of the way!" someone suddenly screamed. "Everyone look! Look at her appearance!" Immediately after, the air seemed to freeze, and everyone's eyes turned to terror. Alani was an elf, facing those stairs. Alani still spoke up calmly. "I know the person you want to take back is not me." Then she turned to Richard and introduced him softly. "Richard, this is Knight Modress." Modress also immediately bowed his head. "It is an honor to meet you. I am Modress. I am here to serve you." This sight caused the crowd to explode in shock once again. Why on earth are those knights bowing to a child and calling Alani a spirit? Just who are they? Piru stood in the middle of the crowd, his face still frozen in shock. Moder turned and asked, "Madam, are you two ready? We will set off immediately. Lord Gordon must be looking forward to meeting you both." Alani nodded slightly. "We are all set." Richard gently tugged at her hem and whispered, "Mom." Ilani leaned down, smiling to reassure him. "It is okay, Richard. They won't hurt you. Like we talked about, we are going to see your father." Their hands, one large and one small, gripped each other tightly. Carrying a weight of unspoken words, they slowly let go, as if stepping into a brand new journey. Behind them, the soldiers began to shout, "Break it up! Disperse immediately! No one is allowed to leave the village." Moder added in a cold voice, "Not until we have departed." Then, his gaze shifted toward Richard. He silently appraised the boy. This was Lord Gordon's son, the heir to the Achaemenor bloodline. Just then, a subordinate rushed up, sounding panicked. "Captain Moder, we have a problem." Moder frowned. "What is it?" The man swallowed hard. "The lady is gone." Moder's face instantly darkened. "What? Was she not already in the carriage?" The subordinate stammered out an explanation. "She said she forgot something and went back for it, but then a strange wind blew through. After that, they lost her completely." Before anyone could react, a blood-curdling scream echoed from a distance. "Emergency! The village is on fire!" Total chaos broke out. A fire? Where? The answer left everyone stunned. It was Alani's house. A subordinate in the back screamed, his voice cracking, "Reporting!" The lady went back inside and set herself on fire. Hearing that, Richard's eyes went dark. "No." Moder whipped his head around to look at the boy. But before he could even move, Richard jumped off his horse in a panic, running and screaming, "No, Mom." Before he could get far, Moder grabbed him firmly, preventing him from taking another step. Richard wailed, his body thrashing wildly. "Let me go. Mom, you did not say it would be like this." Desperate, broken cries burst from his throat as he tried to claw his way out of the captain's grip. Moder said coldly, "Keep it together." This was the lady's choice. Before them, the flames completely swallowed the house. It blazed fiercely, as if incinerating her very life. It was a pure, courageous choice, even if it meant sacrificing everything. She had to protect what mattered most. Moder thought to himself, "She truly was a woman worthy of Lord Gordon. Please, do not let their expectations and everything they sacrificed for you go to waste." Memories flooded back of Alani speaking gently to him. "In just a few days, we will leave this village, the place where you were born." Back then, Richard did not understand why his mother waited until after his 10th birthday to tell him his father was still alive. Ilani had only replied, "Because there was no other way. My carelessness caused something to happen to your body. The only way is to find your father." Richard asked curiously how his parents had met. Ilani gave a soft smile. "That is a long story involving some very complicated powers. I had to take you away, change our names, and go into hiding. Until the ritual occurred, she was forced to reveal her true form." Richard was shocked. "Mom, are you a spirit?" Alani just laughed, her voice tinged with helplessness. "I no longer have enough mana to maintain this form. My condition will likely get worse." Hearing that, Richard's expression clouded over. "Are you sick, Mom?" She nodded. "I might not make it through this. One side has to be sacrificed. He was terrified, and before he could process it, Ilani ruffled his hair. While you are with your father, I will be away for a while to recover. Richard immediately protested. I do not want to. I want to stay with you. But Ilani coaxed him tenderly. Do not be stubborn. This is all for you. You want me to get better, do you not? Even as she pinched his cheek, Richard wanted to argue, but the words would not come. Ilani's gaze became more tender than ever. Remember, no matter where you go, I am always with you. Back in reality, Richard was now unconscious, lying on a pile of straw. Motor ordered the carriage to head out first. Guard him carefully. The subordinate replied instantly. Yes, sir. Another man nearby asked hesitantly, Is it really okay to knock out Lord Gordon's son like that? Motor answered coldly, There was no better way. Another soldier asked, Captain, what should we do with this village? Motor's voice dropped. Keep some of the women. Move them to other places to spread the word that the lady is dead. The subordinate nodded. And the others? Motor's eyes turned icy. Lord Gordon does not want anyone knowing the boy's location. He gave a sharp command, surround the village, kill them all. Richard's memories echoed in his dreams. Mom, what is Dad like? Ilani had smiled back then. Your father is a genius. He is incredibly powerful, but also a master of military strategy and politics. 10 years ago, he seized the spirit court in the Evernight Forest with a single ability, shaking the entire Holy Alliance. But it has been years. I heard he has become a marquis at the Black Rose Castle. Richard snapped his eyes open, his tears not yet dry. Mom! He bolted upright, rubbing his head. Where am I? His eyes slowly drifted toward the fireplace, burning across from him. Faint memories flickered. He was being pinned down by that night. Suddenly remembering something, his hand froze mid-air before he scrambled out of bed. Mom! I have to find Mom. Richard ran around the room, frantically looking everywhere. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Who is it? The door slowly creaked open, and a girl poked her head in. Looks like you're finally awake. Richard was dazed. Who are you? She spoke calmly. Your clothes are here. Change into them after you've bathed. Richard looked down at himself and immediately turned bright red. My clothes. He quickly covered himself. Why do you have them? The girl set the items down. I've left some new clothes here too. The bathroom is on the right. Get cleaned up first. The Lord wants to see you. Hearing that, Richard froze. The Lord? He slowly pushed the door open, stepping cautiously into a massive room. His small frame felt completely lost in the vast space. Richard tugged at his collar. This place was huge. The candles on the table flickered, creating an atmosphere that was both warm and suffocating. Heavy footsteps echoed slowly down the stairs. Richard frowned, tilting his head up to look toward the landing. A man leaned against the railing, his deep voice booming down. Finally, we meet. His eyes were cold as he called out the boy's full name, Richard Achiemoner. Then, he smirked, his voice dropping to a low growl. My own flesh and blood. Through the window, the faint candlelight flickered, creating a silence that was almost stifling. Godon sat there, every movement slow and precise, his elegant hands neatly slicing into a piece of beef. It was as if everything was under his complete control. In total contrast, Richard sat across from him, eating hurriedly with no manners at all. He seemed to be pouring all his emotions into every bite. Godon spoke up, his tone calm. Life has its ups and downs, but you should never miss out on the joy of eating. That's what Elian used to say. You have your mother's personality. Hearing that, Richard stopped dead. His eyes darkened, and the meat in his hand suddenly tasted like ash. He slammed his fork onto the table. Godon continued as if nothing had happened. Even though things didn't go exactly as planned, Elian truly did sacrifice herself for both you and me. She protected you and kept my identity hidden from the other factions. So, you need to understand this. Richard Achiemoner. Richard kept his head down, his hands clutching the napkin tightly. My name is just Richard. Godon immediately shut him down. Whether you admit it or not, Elian never gave you that name. It's too late for that. You will carry the name Achiemoner. In the end, she entrusted you to me. Regardless of what she said before, the blood flowing through your veins belongs to the Achiemoner family. His voice turned ice cold. That is the blood of the Achiemoner family, belonging to the Holy Union Empire. Our house was meant to hold the rank of Grand Duke. That status is higher than the current dukes. But throughout history, those with this blood were so wild that they were hated by the other powers. We became a thorn in the side of the old nobility, labeled as crude and lawless. And yet, those same people worshipped a very different kind of man. A man who preferred raw meat, demanding it be carved directly from a living body no more than 1 hour before he ate. We called him Philip the Bloodthirsty, yet that man was considered the pinnacle of nobility. Do you know why? Because he was the greatest emperor this land has ever known. He held absolute military power, ruthless and unpredictable. He forced every noble to bow their heads. Richard's eyes widened in shock. Someone like that actually ruled the entire empire? Godon let out a twisted smile. Meanwhile, we, the Achimaner family, are seen as crazy and dangerous. So if you carry this blood, you have no other choice. You must become stronger. You must have more power than anyone else. Richard scowled, his eyes filled with rage. So is this why you and my mom were willing to sacrifice everything to fight against those in power? Godon stood up and turned his back, his cold voice echoing, "Fight against them?" He shoved his hands into his pockets and glanced back at Richard. "No, I simply won't accept being controlled by those useless fools. You're only 10 years old. Do you really think the world is that simple? When you finally understand the truth, you'll realize that even those closest to you are no different from that bloodthirsty emperor." Just then, a woman appeared at the door, bowing low. "Lord Godden, we've just captured spies sent by the other nobles. They've infiltrated the territory." Godon's voice was like ice. "How many times does this make it?" She replied. "This time it's an organization involving over 100 commoners." Godon didn't hesitate for a second. "Regardless of who they are, eliminate them all. Don't leave a single one alive." The woman bowed her head. "Yes, my lord." Godon added, "And one more thing. This is your half-sister. From now on, you will handle the matters of the castle." The girl maintained her somber expression. "Understood." Richard suddenly kicked the table hard and stood up. He marched straight toward Godon, his voice demanding answers. "I'm asking you, what was my mother to you, anyway?" Godon lowered his gaze slightly, his voice dead. "Elian represents nothing anymore." Richard froze, his pupils shrinking as a dry, hollow laugh escaped him. "Ha!" He looked at the man before him with pure, unadulterated contempt. "You don't even deserve to say her name." Godon didn't respond. He just quietly watched the boy's back as he disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. "Ha!" Gorton spoke slowly. "Her final request to me was to hand you over. I believe she left some kind of wish with you, but I'm not interested. You should understand one thing, realizing your mother's wish won't be simple." He paused for a beat, and then continued. "Even though she gave you to me, I won't help you directly, nor will I give you any power. In the coming days, while you are kept here, you can only rely on yourself to find a way to seize the opportunities I allow." Richard clenched his fists as memories of his mother came flooding back. He once asked her, "Mom, it's been so many years since you've seen him. Do you still love Dad?" Back then, Elaine only smiled and said, "I hope that after you meet your father, you'll like him too." But right now, Richard gritted his teeth, tears welling up in his eyes as his voice trembled. "No, I hate him." The sound of hooves stopped abruptly, kicking up dust and sand. Modres pulled the reins, his voice dropping low. "We're almost there." 2 days later, a massive tower rose before Richard's eyes, the deep blue Magic City Tower. Modres said this was the training ground Lord Gorton had arranged for young Master Richard. The boy stood there dazed, and before he could react, Modres added, "Your teacher is waiting inside." Before Richard was a scene straight out of a dream. The entire city was bathed in a mysterious blue light, with tall, intricate, and shimmering buildings stretching as far as the eye could see. He dismounted his horse and looked up, unable to hide his amazement. Is this really the legendary Magic City? His eyes followed every building, every mage and student passing by, each carrying a different magical aura. Richard couldn't help but exclaim, "I've only seen these things in Mom's books." Meanwhile, Modres was talking to someone else. "The Lord mentioned your past relationship as mentor and student, and he hopes you'll put your heart into teaching the young master." The other man gave a faint, mocking laugh. "Student-teacher relationship? I remember now. That Marquess of yours still owes me a mountain of unpaid materials." Modres immediately countered. "The principal was paid in full. It's only that interest rate you arbitrarily raised that we refuse to accept." The man waved him off. "Forget it. Since he's been handed to me for training, you guys probably know his true identity." He glanced at Richard from a distance, his eyes filled with appraisal. "This kid's magic talent isn't bad at all." But then his voice grew colder. "Don't think I'll teach him for free. Do you know how many geniuses beg to study under me every year? I've even turned down a few divine authority holders." Modres frowned. "So, what are you saying?" The man gave a smirk. "Simple. Let's test his strength first. In the world of magic, not everyone can learn the craft. Only those with special physiques or the right bloodline have a chance to touch this power. Because of that, screening and classification are always the top priorities. At Deep Blue City, they set up a place called the ranking sprung to test abilities. Mina stepped forward to announce the rules, telling everyone to line up and wait for their evaluation. The atmosphere grew tense as each person stepped up. A student suddenly rushed out, unable to handle the pressure of waiting. The result was quickly announced. Tester number 76 achieved only white mana entry level. The crowd immediately started whispering just another rich kid trying his luck, but clearly nothing special. So far, no one had reached the intermediate level. Modress leaned down to reassure Richard, "It'll be your turn soon. Just step into the Sprung's mana field to create a resonance. You'll get the result instantly, but you'll have to endure a little pain." When tester number 77 was called, the crowd buzzed again, eyes fixed on a boy dressed in simple clothes. Someone scoffed, "You can tell he's not from a magic academy, and he's so young. I wonder if he's in the wrong place." Richard stepped up and stood before the ranking sprung. An announcement rang out, telling him to stay within the testing zone. But the moment he touched the energy, his face contorted. It felt like something was invading his body, a pain so intense, it was almost unbearable. Modrez shouted from below, "Young master, hold on, don't let Lord Gorton down." Those words reminded Richard of Gorton's warning he had to seize his own opportunities. He gritted his teeth, his eyes full of determination. He would absolutely not let them look down on him. Time passed, and the crowd's mockery slowly turned into shock. That kid has been holding out for over 10 minutes. Mina held the evaluation orb, her voice rising. The result is in golden mana, upper level. But before anyone could react, a burst of black energy suddenly erupted. Richard's eyes widened, his pupils shrinking as a blurry image of a castle flashed in his mind. The pain surged violently, and he let out a scream that sent the whole area into chaos. The crowd panicked. "What is that black energy? I've never seen magic like that." The warning system blared repeatedly, detecting a dangerous and abnormal fluctuation. The mages around them had no idea what was happening. His movements and power source were completely foreign. Modrez stood frozen, his face turning pale. That is a creature of the abyss. In that moment, the memory of Elaine's warning surfaced in his mind. This is why I'm forced to turn to Gorton. Even if reaching out causes a storm among the nobility, I have no other choice. She looked at Modrez with pleading eyes, begging him to protect Richard. Modrez knelt, hand over heart, and swore on his life to keep the boy safe. Back in the present, he charged toward Richard, only to be thrown back by a blinding golden light. He could feel it. The darkness was overwhelming, far too much for any mere human body to handle. Mina screamed for backup as the ranking sprung erupted in chaos. Suddenly, a pillar of light slammed down from the sky, and a voice commanded everyone to stand back. Modrez's eyes widened. A legendary mage had arrived. Swaylin descended, instantly binding Richard with her magic. Her expression turned grave. This child bore the mark of a creature from the abyss. Richard's face was stained black, his eyes hollow and dark. He let out a bone-chilling demonic smile, as if something else was pulling the strings, but then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Modrez shouted for him in a panic, but there was no answer. Swaylin barely spared him a glance before saying coldly, "He passed the evaluation." Modrez stood there, stunned. Swaylin let out a faint smirk. "He's qualified to be my apprentice." Night fell, and the sky turned a heavy, oppressive black. In Richard's dreams, fire raged everywhere. He ran through the flames, crying out, "Mom!" Ahead of him, Alani's silhouette appeared, but she didn't turn around. She only softly whispered his name. Richard reached out, desperate to grab her, but the image dissolved into smoke. He bolted upright, gasping for air, cold sweat pouring down his face. "Mom?" A voice came from the shadows. "Oh, you are finally awake?" Richard snapped his head around, his eyes full of suspicion. "Who are you?" The man spoke gently. "Don't be afraid. I am Popovich. The legendary mage Swaylin asked me to look after you. I will also be the one teaching you basic magic from now on." Richard rubbed his head, still dazed. "Swaylin?" He looked at his hands, his mind racing. "What? What did I do back then?" Popovich explained. "You had an accident at the ranking sprung a few hours ago. I have been treating you and keeping an eye on you since. It is okay if you do not remember." Richard tried to think back, but all he recalled was being in the pool before everything went blurry. Popovich shook his head slightly. "Do not force it. You are safe now." Richard's eyes widened. his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. Wait, where is she? Far off. Suelen gazed at the night sky, her voice low. That kid, he does not have any remarkable elemental talent. But his mental strength is off the charts, and it matches the earlier test results. He definitely has innate mana, but it is too balanced, no glaring weaknesses, but no real edge either. So why would a creature of darkness be interested in him? Madrist answered flatly. Because he carries the blood of the Achiminer family. Suelen tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. A mortal vessel resisting that kind of darkness. Do you have any idea how that usually ends? Modrest did not blink. Protecting young Master Richard is my only duty, she smirked. Willing to throw your life away, then? I have known you a long time, but I never pegged you for the fanatically loyal type. Oh, by the way, the testing fee plus the medical bills come to exactly 116,000 Imperial gold coins. Madrist looked away, put it on our tab. Suelen immediately glared at him. How long do you plan on being in my debt? This is not a charity. Modrest cut her off. Lord Gadden has already agreed to negotiate the price you asked for earlier. Suelen raised an eyebrow. Ha, you are really willing to pay that much for one kid? Madrist crossed his arms. As you have seen, the dark power inside the young master is dangerous. It will kill him sooner or later. The only way to save him is to keep him by your side. Only a legendary mage can keep that power in check. Suelen smiled, her mind already calculating the profit. And what are you offering? Those 2 pocket dimensions Gadden owns are not bad. I want 15% of the profits from whichever one I choose. Madrist eyed her warily. You mean the time-space rights? She laughed. No, I want Nolan's time. Madrist shook his head. That is too much. It is beyond what Lord Gadden authorized. Suelen's expression went cold. Then I cannot guarantee I will teach the boy how to survive that darkness. Madrist sighed. Typical. You are as greedy as ever. I will discuss it with the Marquis, but I hope you can compromise so we can actually make a deal. She giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Fine, I will throw you a bone. During the next prayer ceremony at the Eternal Dragon Temple, I will give Richard a hand. How does that sound? Madrist nodded, committing her words to memory. I will report back for instructions. Suelen turned to leave. I will be waiting for your answer. Madrist called out softly as she walked away. The young master is in your hands. Farewell. Night fell completely, and the blue tower glowed in the silence, its yellow lights casting a mystical aura. Inside, Richard was tossing and turning, unable to find any peace. He lay on his back with his hand over his forehead, sweat dripping as hazy images flashed through his mind. The scene from the ritual came back to him, half real and half dream. Richard suddenly bolted upright. Was that real? It felt too vivid. He reached his hand out, and suddenly, strange numbers began to float before his eyes. Richard rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating, but when he looked again, his pupils shrank as a faint blue ring appeared around his irises. From that moment on, no matter where he looked, data sheets popped up. He whispered, "What is all this?" The walls, the bookshelves, the lamp, everything had its own set of information. He turned to the cabinet, and it was the same story with everything else. Richard stood there, frozen, his face going blank. What the hell is happening to me? Water splashed as he leaned down to look at the surface, countless tiny droplets hanging suspended in the air. He saw his own reflection, his face a mask of pure confusion. He touched his eyes, trying to ground himself. This isn't a dream. He tilted his head, feeling the undeniable shift in his body. His vision was sharper, his hearing more acute. It was exactly like the sensation during the ritual. Richard started looking closer. These numbers seemed to have a life of their own as he stared at the lamp and the shelves. He could see their dimensions, their quantity. And as he looked at the bedside cabinet, information about the materials became clearer and clearer. Even looking at a sword revealed detailed data. His expression grew tense, bordering on fear. I can see through the very essence of things. Suddenly, a surge of dark energy swirled around him. Richard clutched his head in agony, gritting his teeth. That was the moment, the choice he made during the ritual. Outside, the moon hung high, the night heavy with an eerie silence. The next morning, a frantic knocking echoed at the door. Student Richard, don't be late. He snapped his eyes open. Today was day 1 of his life, studying magic. Standing before a tiny wooden shack, Richard asked in a daze, "Aren't we supposed to be going to a classroom?" The students nearby bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Master," Popovich replied. "Good morning." Richard pointed toward the crowd of students walking past. "Shouldn't we be heading that way?" Popovich explained. "You're not old enough to study with them yet. Besides, Today is your first lesson. The legendary mage gave strict orders to teach you carefully. Now, get inside. The two of them stepped into the wooden room. Richard looked around, skeptical. This tiny place is the classroom? Popovic just smiled, telling him to stay calm, and pointed at the clock. A flash of golden light erupted. He said it would happen fast. Before Richard could even process it, he instinctively recoiled. The door ahead swung open as white mist began to crawl across the floor, swallowing the entire space. Richard frowned as Popovic spoke with a mysterious tone. "We're here." A second later, the scene before him made his eyes bulge in total shock. Popovic stepped in first, and Richard scrambled to follow. That's when a strange, vast dimension opened up. The teacher turned back, introducing the place slowly. "Welcome to the mirror classroom. From today on, I'll be in charge of your introduction to magic. Just call me Master Popovic." Without giving the boy a chance to adjust, he declared, "First lesson starts now." The opening lesson wasn't about flashy spells. It was something far more abstract, how to observe and think about the magical world. Popovic explained, "Primal power is the foundation that makes up everything. The entire world is built and expanded from it. In the chaos of existence, there are countless worlds, each with its own set of rules. These rules form the skeleton of a world, while the dimensions are the blood vessels that nourish everything." He used the Nolan continent, where they stood as an example, a high-level dimension belonging to the main world. As he spoke, a small flame appeared in his hand, hovering in midair. To an ordinary person, it was just a simple spell. But Popovic looked Richard dead in the eye, his voice growing heavy with meaning. "If your consciousness reaches a higher level, if you look from a different perspective, then what you see and hear might not be reality at all." He gestured to their surroundings. "This mirror room is no different. Everything is just an image reflected into your consciousness through your own senses." Richard stood there, one eyebrow raised, instinctively stroking his chin. His mind was spinning with these new concepts. He was clearly trying to piece it all together. Popovic raised the flame higher and let out a soft sigh. "I know this is far too complex for you right now, but these are the legendary mage's orders. Regardless of your age, I must tell you the truth. Even though it's profound, these truths will help you understand and master magic later on." He continued, "As living beings in the primary dimension, our magic is tied to the rules of this world. That's why the first step in learning magic is absolutely critical." His gaze locked onto Richard. "Your assignment for the next 3 months is to build your very own magic layout." Hearing that, Richard froze in his tracks. My own magic?" The thought looped endlessly in his head. Popovic simply added, "That's all for today. From tomorrow on, make sure you're here on time." Richard was still lost in thought, but he answered reflexively, "Yes, Master." 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. In the legendary mage's territory, a magical portal opened, and Sue Helen stepped out with an effortless grace. Her white hair and pale skin stood out in the dim light. Everyone around her immediately bowed in welcome. She walked in, casually remarking, "It took nearly 2 months to collect those debts this time." Her eyes swept over the crowd, tinged with curiosity. "Did anything major happen while I was gone?" Someone stepped forward to report immediately. "A suspicious monster has appeared near the North Tower. There's an urgent mission requiring a legendary mage's attention." Sue Helen took off her hat, looking completely unimpressed. "I have zero interest in missions like that." Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she turned to Popovic. "How's that kid Richard doing lately?" Popovic handed the magic layout to Swalen, his voice brimming with pride. "This kid Richard has an incredible ability to grasp things. He can already use basic magic. And there is even a surprise for you. Legendary mage, please take a look." Swalen took it, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is this really a magic layout? Has he already reached this stage?" Popovic smiled, clearly unable to hide his satisfaction. "He definitely lived up to your expectations. That boy has a freakish talent for magic layouts. In just 2 months, he has managed to keep the error margin down to 0.01 centimeters. With such extreme stability, the surrounding mages immediately broke into a buzz. A margin of error of 0.01 centimeters? That level of precision is something only high-level archmages with years of training can achieve. Some even guessed it was the work of a seasoned expert. But then Popovic shook his head. "Sorry, but you guessed wrong. This is the work of a new apprentice." The entire crowd was left speechless. "An apprentice? That is impossible." Right then, someone pointed toward the dorms, their voice panicked. "Look over there!" Every eye turned to the night sky as magical fireworks exploded brilliantly, trailing intense ripples of energy. In a dorm area where magic was strictly forbidden at night, this scene left everyone stunned. At the center of the commotion, Richard stood there, frowning slightly before breaking into a smile. Finally, I did it. After 2 months of non-stop practice, he had finally stabilized his ability to see through the essence of matter, and with it, he completed his very first original magic layout. Popovich watched the scene, unable to hide his shock. That energy ripple, it really is, Richard. That kid finished an assignment that should have taken 3 months in just 2. Not only that, but he is even creating his own magic, far surpassing most professional mages. Such talent is truly a rare find. Swalen turned and asked, has his physical condition fluctuated at all during this time? Popovich held out a golden orb to explain. During the magic casting, he could feel the vibrations of Richard's aura. Although there were signs of instability, the boy was doing his best to keep it under control. Hearing this, Swalen looked toward the dorms, her gaze deepening. Then it is time. Let him step into real school life. 1 month later, at the Deep Blue Magic Academy, the opening day was buzzing with excitement. Mina stood at the main gate, reminding everyone that today was the first day of the new semester, and no one was allowed to be late. Students rushed past, grumbling about being late. Amidst the crowd, Richard appeared and walked up. Master Popovic told me to come here. Mina turned around and froze for a moment when she saw him. Is that you? She quickly recognized him as the boy who had caused a stir at the ranking spring 6 months ago, though he had grown much taller. She led Richard through the massive academy gates. She introduced each area, from the bridge up front to the dorms and the teaching wings. This is where you will be studying from now on. Finally, they stopped in front of a classroom. Mina said, this is your first magic theory class. We are a bit late, but since you are new, it is fine. Just follow me in. She looked at Richard once more and added, if you feel out of place, just let me know. You are still quite young, and there is a big gap between you and the other students. But before she could finish, Richard cut her off, his voice firm. I will be fine, ma'am. I can take care of myself. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere felt off. Students were huddled together whispering, their eyes full of curiosity and excitement. Rumors about the new student had been spreading for a while. Some said he had a legendary background, others called him a rare genius. Some even claimed he was the disciple of a legendary mage. But the more they heard, the more skeptical they became, because he looked so young. Just as the noise was peaking, Mina walked in, tapped for silence, and announced that a new student would be joining them today. When Richard was called up, every eye in the room fixed on him. He was clearly much younger than everyone else, yet he stood there with total composure. As soon as he finished his introduction, the room erupted in chatter. Some were shocked, others suspicious, and one kid even flat out asked if it was true that he was the disciple of a legendary mage. The class held its breath, waiting for an answer, but Richard calmly denied it. He made it clear he had never even met that mage. He was just a regular student there to learn like everyone else, currently under Master Popovich's guidance. He even gave a light smile, as if the rumors had nothing to do with him. His answer left the class stunned, and many started thinking it was all just a big misunderstanding. But in a corner, Papin kept his head down, hands clenched tight, his eyes dark with resentment. He clearly did not believe a word of it, and was seething with frustration. Mina quickly settled the class, and got back to the lecture, though the tension still lingered. When the bell finally rang, the stiff atmosphere evaporated instantly. Students cheered, some inviting friends out, others heading for the dorms. The room became lively again. In contrast, Richard just stared at the notebook in his hand, looking bored. He had already learned everything from today's lecture ages ago in the mirror room. To him, this was all just a repeat, nothing new at all. Just then, Popovich appeared, announcing that starting next week, Richard would officially begin his full school life at the academy. This caught him completely off guard, because, with his current skill level, he was already miles ahead of the standard curriculum. Popovich smiled and admitted as much, saying that his natural talent was simply too high, and his learning speed had far exceeded all expectations. In fact, even 7 months ago when he first started creating his own magic, he was already more than capable of keeping up with the advanced lessons. The only reason Popovich had held him back was because of his young age, wanting to give him more time to train. Hearing this, Richard looked displeased and insisted on staying exactly where he was. But Popovich just shook his head, explaining that this wasn't just his decision, it was the will of the legendary mage herself. Returning to a school environment was necessary, not just to study magic, but to fully develop as a person. Richard frowned, the annoyance written all over his face. Again, another decision made by that legendary mage. In all this time, he hadn't even met her once, yet she was supposed to be his mentor and guide. Popovich placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a confident, reassuring smile, telling him that being her student was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Richard should feel lucky, as every arrangement was made for his own benefit and everything was going exactly according to her plan. But Richard still wasn't buying it. He turned and walked away in a huff, feeling like his life was being micromanaged without him actually learning anything new. Fine then, going to the library would be a much better use of his time. He hadn't gone far when someone suddenly shouted, forcing him to turn around. Richard's face was still clouded with frustration. Before he could even process what was happening, Papin lunged forward and landed a heavy punch right to his face, knocking him backward. The students on the upper floors immediately went wild, cheering at the sight of a fight breaking out. Papin stood there, his face twisted with pure aggression. He screamed in rage, calling Richard a damn fraud and accusing him of faking a title he didn't deserve. Richard clutched his head as he sat up. Before he could react, Papin continued to mock him about being the student of a legendary mage, causing the surrounding crowd to buzz with gossip. Liliana rushed over and whispered to Tiana that Papin was actually a level 2 mage with genuine talent. However, he had been repeatedly rejected from becoming a student of the legendary mage, which had left him feeling incredibly bitter and resentful. After holding it in all day, he had finally hit his breaking point. Up above, Van casually admitted that he had intentionally spread the rumors just to provoke Papin. He wanted to see what Richard was really made of, even though Minnie warned him not to take it too far before something went wrong. Down below, Papin grabbed Richard by the collar and hauled him up, mockingly asking if he was scared and trying to force him to admit he was a fake. But in that exact moment, the look in Richard's eyes shifted. A memory flashed through his mind of the brutal, relentless training he had endured over the past 6 months. Under Popovich's harsh guidance, he had pushed his body to the absolute limit to turn himself into a vessel strong enough to contain massive magic. He had gritted his teeth through every strike and every drop of sweat, all for the sake of becoming stronger. Back in the present, Richard was no longer the weak kid who could be pushed around. With a cold expression, he reached out and clamped his hand firmly onto Papin's wrist. He squeezed so hard that Papin's face instantly went pale as he cried out in pain. Before he could move, Richard delivered a lightning-fast counterpunch. The blow sent Papin flying backward, leaving the entire crowd stunned into silence. Liliana and Tiana stared, their eyes wide with shock. Even Pandan couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Richard pulled his hand back, his gaze calm but freezing cold. He uttered just a few short words, telling him that he was the one who was weak. Papin lay on the ground, grinding his teeth in pure hatred. People nearby rushed over to check on him, but Papin's rage had already exploded beyond his control. Papin slammed his hand onto the ground, screaming that he was a level 2 mage before immediately unleashing a fireball spell. The air around them grew intensely hot, but Richard just glanced at it and raised his hand, causing his mana to erupt so powerfully it lit up the entire area. The students watched in horror as they realized this wasn't a normal spell. A level 3 firestorm slammed directly toward Papin. This was the Flame Cyclone Formation, a level 3 spell. It combined a standard fire base with the power of wind elements. This allowed the flames to form a massive area of effect attack that could simultaneously obstruct and block incoming magic. His instant cast drawing rate was 87%, which boosted the spell's power by 87%. Compared to normally drawing a magic circle, where the margin of error was only 0.01. With his current ability, even when activating an instant magic circle, the drawing rate usually only reached about 80%. Even if I use my true sight ability. Someone on the balcony gasped in disbelief. An instant drawing rate of 87%? And that level 3 magic was strong enough to crack the walls? The bonus multiplier from that drawing rate must be massive, even though that kid is only a level 1 apprentice. Richard stood there dazed, surprised he could already use level 3 magic. As expected of a student of the legendary mage, I guess I got a little ahead of myself. The crowd whispered among themselves, as it was rare to see someone actually apply a year's worth of magic study into a real fight. Master Popovich once warned me not to use high-level magic carelessly. Pandan watched from a distance, sounding impressed. His strength is on a completely different level compared to the average student. He looked down at Papin, realizing that despite his age, Richard was in a league of his own. Papin reached out to take it, his face full of doubt. Here, Papin, Pandalon smirked as he handed it over. Take it, Papin. Go on, someone shouted. And don't you dare forget the deal we made. Once this is over, I'll use my family's influence to make sure you become a student of the legendary mage. Students were running everywhere in a total panic. Get out of here. Wait, isn't that Papin? Has that guy completely lost his mind? He was holding a magic blueprint, and using magic like that on campus was strictly forbidden. This magical surge was no joke. Run. This is no place for kids. Richard stood there frozen, a strange purple aura swirling around him. His eyes went wide with terror, his pupils shrinking to pinpoints. Level 5 magic. The power lifted him off the ground, and he let out a scream of pure agony. Liliana turned pale. That was level 5 magic. A fundamental, divine force spell. How on earth could Papin pull that off? He's gritting his teeth, his face twisted in pain. This magic belonged to the school of the legendary mage himself. Richard's face was a mask of suffering, sweat pouring off him like a rainstorm. Pandalon stood on the sidelines with a wicked, twisted smile. I can't move, Richard wheezed. I can't even set up a magic circle to fight back. And then there was that piercing sound, making his head feel like it was about to explode. Papin looked at Pandalon and asked, Is that enough? I think the kid's learned his lesson. He replied, Not yet. Just wait a little longer. He started to get worried. But I'm afraid he might actually go insane. Pandalon gave a cold, sinister laugh. I said, Wait. I want to see exactly what this brat is really made of. If he ends up going crazy, that's fine by me. Richard's face was mangled with pain, his eyes shut tight, and the veins on his forehead bulging. No, he frowned, his eyes snapping open, his pupils contracting sharply. No. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy aura erupted from Richard. Papin stared in total shock at the black mist lunging toward him. The dark energy completely swallowed him up. What is this power? The black smoke vanished, leaving Papin clutching his head and screaming in pain. Ah, my head. It hurts so much. A classmate rushed over. Papin, are you okay? The magic instructors came running after students reported the fight. Papin was rolling on the ground, holding his head. Professor, Papin just. He suddenly went crazy. Richard was lying there, completely unconscious. Richard's out cold too. Pandalon rushed down toward them. Papin just lost it? What the hell was that? He was so close to finishing that kid off. The magic blueprint was lying on the ground. He had to use his magic to get it back right now. I can't let anyone find out I was the one behind this mess. A pair of feet walked toward the blueprint. Professor, I found the magic blueprint that Papin used during the fight. The mage looked at her suspiciously. What? She continued. It looks like there might be a mastermind behind all of this. Pandalon looked at Minnie with a face full of pure terror. Miss Minnie held the paper, glancing over at Pandalon. Sue Helen asked skeptically, Did that weird energy really drive him insane? The Soul Stone replied, Yes. According to Papin's memory, he saw a burst of unusual energy coming from Richard. That energy is messing with my head. But it's strange. None of the other witnesses saw it. They all thought Papin had just snapped. She turned. At that moment, I was using telepathy magic. It's very likely the darkness inside Richard took advantage of that divine magic. The stone replied, I suspect the same thing. Sue Helen looked up. If that's the case, Richard has already started using it subconsciously. The power of darkness. Popovic, you need to keep a very close eye on him. Yes, legendary mage, he answered. Loham and Zell stepped forward, following the orders of the one who handed out Pandalon's punishment. How do you think we should handle this? Sue Helen leaned back. Do you two have any thoughts? Loham spoke up. The one who started this has already been punished. Pandalon is exceptionally talented, and he's the son of Duke Solum from the Sacred Tree dynasty. Even Master Cross has praised his talent for crafting. I think we should let him keep his status as a student. Zell countered. I think Duke Solum of the Sacred Tree dynasty has 2 other sons who are also very gifted. We could easily drop Pandalon and prioritize their self-funded spots to keep the funding coming from the Solom family. Sue Helen replied, That could help cover our losses from last season. Loham cut in, That's not right. Lady Sue Helen's student spots are precious. How can we just sell them off like that? Doing that would mean adding another self-funded student. Zlay looked at him. Reputation is a problem for the future, but the losses are right in front of us. I don't want Lady Sue Helen to have to take on grueling missions just to make up the difference. The two began to argue. If we have too many students who don't have the skills to back up their titles, it will be a disaster for your reputation. My lady, weren't you the one who suggested letting Pandalon buy his way in the first place? Zlay dismissed him. Every bit of income is the foundation of the Deep Blue Magic Tower. I'm just prioritizing our most practical interests. Suelen let out a heavy sigh. With the new funding, Deep Blue wouldn't be running on empty anymore. Lately, they'd finished collecting teeth from the younger dragons. Plus, those beasts were moving further away, making each hunt an exhausting ordeal. You guys have a point. Just look at these useless students, they're nothing but trouble. If this keeps up, they're going to ruin the reputation of my academy. It's tough, no matter what we do, Loham and Jola said in unison. So, what is your plan, Your Highness? Suelen rubbed her hands together. Obviously, Suelen's eyes sparkled. We can't just rely on adults. Help me come up with a solution that satisfies both sides. Jolay looked on in exasperation. Her Highness's greed was showing again. Suelen then turned and walked away. This was all part of Pandal's plan anyway. Word is that during the last match, Richard, a first-tier student, actually used third-tier magic. It seems your time teaching him paid off, Popovic, he replied. It's mostly because the boy is a natural. Richard truly is a remarkable talent. She rubbed her chin, recalling her own past. Even when I first started learning magic, I couldn't pull off something like that. Popovich added, there's another reason the boy was able to do it. This past year, he hasn't just been studying magic. His physical strength, his mindset, and his sheer willpower have pushed him to new heights. Richard once said his mother sacrificed everything to protect him. She taught him what it truly means to be a man. I have to become strong so I can protect the things I care about. Suelen smirked, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. The sky had turned a soft amber as the warm sunlight washed over everything. She looked up at the sky. More than just a master of rune crafting, Deep Blue might just be birthing a legend. A month later, news came that someone from Richard's family had arrived to visit, bringing a mountain of gifts. Hearing this, he rushed in the direction the messenger pointed. Gordon's face flashed through his mind. It couldn't be him, could it? The door slowly creaked open, and Richard froze at the sight of the person standing there. Huh? Erin turned around, her voice low and somber. It's been a while, Richard, she added, my dear half-brother. 3 days earlier, at Black Rose Castle, the lights flickered low. Gordon held a glass of red wine as news from Deep Blue arrived. Over the past year, Richard had learned and grown quite a bit. The deal with that money-grubbing hag is due for a new payment in a few days. Mordred is on a pursuit mission, so this time, you're coming with me. To settle the debt, you'll be staying in the city of Deep Blue. To crossed her arms, looking hesitant. My lord, I'm worried about my mother's condition. I don't think she can hold on much longer. Her health has been failing lately. I was hoping I could stay by her side until the very end. Gordon replied coldly. Your mother isn't worth wasting any more time on. For the Achimonder family, those who have lost their value cannot be a blade. They can only turn to dust. I am ordering you to leave in 2 days. Dee's face darkened as she clenched her teeth. Yes, sir. Gordon stood up to leave. As my own flesh and blood, the strange anomaly in Richard's body is worth paying attention to. According to the reports, the boy has unconsciously tapped into the power of darkness. I want you by his side, watching his every move for me. De bowed her head. Understood, my lord. He added, take that girl from the fallen noble family we took in along with you. She should be around Richard's age. She replied, yes, but she's always handled intelligence work. Gordon looked out at the sky. It doesn't matter. Let her return as part of the family's bloodline. In the future, Richard's growth will ensure our legacy continues. A year later, the city of Deep Blue stood tall, solemn, and quiet. Students were chatting away. School starts tomorrow. Did you finish your homework? Not yet. I'm going to have to pull an all-nighter. Dee, completely bare, sat on the bed before stepping out. Today marks the start of another semester. I can't believe it's already been a year since I arrived here. Her hair fluttered in the wind. Time really does fly. In some ways, this place suits me even better than Black Rose Castle. Richard was also starting his 3rd semester of magic studies. The kid was almost 13 years old. Where is everyone? A maid stepped in. I'm here, Lady D. De glanced back. Go and prepare a meal for young Master Richard. It was time for his daily health boost. In the Deep Blue Academy dormitory, Richard was doing push-ups, getting ready for the new term. Sweat dripped onto the floor when a voice called out, Master Richard, Lady D is out today, so she asked me to prepare a full meal for you. He looked up, not again. Erin sat down, shyly brushing her hair back. Good morning, Master Richard. He remembered that since his half-sister, Day, came to look after him a year ago, Erin had been showing up once a week. She asked, "Have you been waiting long? The other delicacies will be served soon. Please, eat while it's hot." Richard looked at the plate with disgust. It was always something bizarre. Erin introduced the dish. "This is the bone of a Komodo earth dragon. This is Hatano fish from the deep sea. And we have warrior wine brewed by the elite dwarves of the Fire Canyon." Richard picked up his utensils. Every time she comes, she brings these strange dishes. He glanced at Erin, frowning slightly. This maid always wore such skimpy outfits. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. Erin turned toward me and asked, "Huh? Young master, why aren't you eating? Is it because my cooking tastes bad?" Richard replied bashfully, "Oh, no, it's not that. I just finished training, so I'm not really hungry yet." She moved the plate closer. "You can't do that. She told me to make sure you finish every bite. These are all key ingredients for a tonic, prepared using a special method. If you eat it all, it'll boost your strength and physical condition. Should I feed you?" Richard's face turned red. No, that's not necessary. I can eat by myself." Erin looked at him and said softly, "Please, eat up. There's a saying I learned at Deep Blue over the past year. To have the strength of a dragon, you must first have the appetite of a dragon. The high-level mages here all eat a lot. These ingredients were specially prepared by Miss Day for your constitution. And I put my whole heart into it, too. I hope you enjoy your meal." She leaned in close. "I would give everything I have to serve you, young master." As Richard was eating, his face turned bright red, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed backward. "It's so hot. I can't take it anymore." Erin rushed over in a panic. "Young master, there's white smoke coming out of your mouth. You're burning up, everything's spinning." She worried that she had messed up. Maybe she added too many medicinal herbs, or perhaps after a year of eating this food, the effects were finally kicking in. It was time. She had to help him calm down. Right then, a thick, damp mist began to swirl before their eyes. Richard slowly opened his eyes and looked around, dazed. He muttered, "My head is still spinning after eating that stuff." Erin spoke in a gentle voice. "Young master, are you awake?" Richard jumped and turned toward her. "Why are you here?" She softly replied, "I'm just taking care of you." That meal was a specially crafted medicinal dish. The effects are quite potent, and since your body hasn't adapted yet, the reaction was a bit intense. Richard pushed himself up, feeling his whole body burning and his head still pounding. Erin quickly reached out to support him. "Careful, young master." He frowned slightly. "I'm okay, just a bit dizzy." Erin shook her head, her tone turning more serious. "Don't take this lightly. These medicinal properties have been building up for a long time, and they've only just hit you this hard today. You need to rest." She helped him lean against the edge of the tub and gently wiped his forehead with a warm towel. The room fell silent, filled only by the drifting steam. Erin spoke slowly. "I used to think I could only live my life according to what others planned for me." Richard opened his eyes slightly to look at her as she continued, "But I'll never forget what you just said." Richard shook his head slightly. His voice was weak but clear. "You aren't anyone's tool. Everyone has their own path to follow." Hearing that, Erin's eyes shimmered. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." A moment later, Richard couldn't hold on any longer. His body went limp, and he passed out. Erin gasped, "Young master." She quickly caught him and laid him down to rest. Looking at his face, still flushed from the medicinal power, she let out a soft sigh. She thought back to his words about everyone having their own path. Erin's gaze gradually became more determined. She smiled faintly and whispered, "My name is Erin, and from today on, I'll take good care of you, Master Richard." Diamonds continued to swirl beautifully outside the building. Popovich suddenly spoke up. "What? Richard is taking the day off today?" Stephen's son quickly replied, "Yes," Richard's servant informed me. "Apparently, he's not feeling well." He continued in a low voice. "He was perfectly healthy yesterday and even finished the physical exercises I assigned with so much energy. Slacking off on the very first day of the semester. That brat," Stephen's son added. "It seems I wasn't meant to get acquainted with Master Richard today." Popovic suddenly remembered something. "Well, it can't be helped. I originally wanted everyone to meet first. Since you're all new students recruited by the legendary mage, I guess we'll just have to wait until next time for a proper introduction. For now, I'll lead you to the mirror classroom first." Immediately, Randon's face flashed in Stephen's son's mind. He smiled and continued, "It's a real shame. I wanted to apologize for what my brother, Randon, did last time. My foolish brother bringing such disgrace to our family. The students immediately looked up at the sky. You looked at the symbol on that student's badge. He was from the Sorum family. Word has it that this semester, another transfer student has been chosen by the legendary mage. It's very likely him. Popovic spoke in a deep voice. Don't worry about it. Richard isn't the type to hold a grudge. I'm sure he's already forgotten about it after a whole year. Stephen quickly followed up. I've heard about Master Richard's achievements. A level 1 student who can already use level 3 magic. That's truly impressive. I heard that last semester, he also had the highest scores in magic structure in the entire grade. Both Instructor Popovic and His Excellency, the legendary mage, are confident that Richard will become a magical runic architect in the future. He suddenly interrupted, not just a runic architect. His Excellency even expects that one day Richard will become. Popovic's tone carried a hint of pride. A saint architect. I've heard that Master Stephen's magical talent is also quite high. In the future, the two of you might create some real sparks while working together. On an architect's creation, his tone remained perfectly calm. It's a pity, really. Unlike my brother, I never had any burning desire to become a great rune master. In the end, that lack of ambition only fueled my envy. It seems my natural talents have nothing to do with being a rune master, but that doesn't mean I don't have high expectations. I finally get to meet Richard, the one who's receiving so much favor from Her Highness. Right now, at the Deep Blue Central Library, Dee speaks up urgently. Your Highness, the guest has been waiting for quite some time. Dee speaks with a formal tone. Lady Sue Helen, I am here on behalf of the Archeron family to finalize this month's trade agreement. Dee looks up toward the balcony. Your Highness, besides the trade guest, there is news from the mirror classroom. Duke Sorum's son has arrived and is waiting for an audience with you. Sue Helen snaps back abruptly. I'm busy. Tell them to wait a bit longer. Dee continues, sounding a bit impatient. But you've already kept Sorum's son waiting for 3 hours. I'm so sorry, miss. When Her Highness gets obsessed with something, she tends to lose track of everything else. Dee slowly shakes her head. It's fine. I haven't been waiting that long. From above, Sue Helen suddenly speaks. Oh, look at that. Garton's daughter. Down below, Dee is startled by those words, and a book suddenly tumbles down from the high shelves. Dee quickly reaches up to catch it before it hits the ground. This is. Sue Helen looks down with a mischievous smirk and says to Dee, don't you dare use your father's twisted values to try and continue his bloodline through him. Richard is my student now. During this golden period of his training and growth, he doesn't need any distractions or ulterior motives. Consider this, a penalty for being disrespectful to me. This month's contract fee is increased by 20%. The heavy book is now firmly in Dee's hand. She hesitates for a moment before looking up. How did you know? Sue Helen's lips curl into a smile. I've known about this for a long time. I was just curious to see how those little temptations would affect Richard. In Deep Blue, don't think you can hide anything from me. Let's go. It's time to meet my new student. I'm going to make a massive profit off this boy. Dee lets out a slow sigh. I was wondering what was so important that you'd risk offending Duke Sorum, just to prioritize this student. Sue Helen continues excitedly. My way is always the best way. Out of Sorum's 2 remaining sons, I'll only pick one to replace Randon's spot. Not only will I collect a new tuition fee, but I'll use Randon's troublemaking as an excuse to squeeze a massive compensation out of them. Meanwhile, over at the mirror classroom, Stephen speaks up quickly. This is the first time I've witnessed the unique traditional magic of this mirror classroom. It's truly dizzying, even a bit terrifying. Randon described feeling exactly the same kind of fear when he first arrived. I'm Stephen, and he's Randon. Even though we're biological brothers and look somewhat alike, our personalities are completely different. As for me, I've heard my brother mention you quite often. Lady Minnie, you are a student of the legendary mage from the Marquis Neo family. She rests her chin on her hand, responding with a cold tone. Don't use that superior tone with me, and I don't care how your brother used to describe me. He quickly follows up. Even though I'm younger than my brother, I'm much more mature than he is. Minnie's gaze remains sharp and piercing. I've also heard that among Duke Sorum's sons, there's one who is a dragon blood sorcerer. Though extremely rare, it's one of the most high-end and prestigious branches in the world of sorcery. Don't tell me. That's you? Stephen gives a small smile. Since Lady Minnie already knows about me, I'll get straight to the point. An alliance between the Marquis Neo family and the Sorum family is currently the most beneficial choice for both sides. Let's restart what my foolish brother ruined. Lady Minnie, you and I have a new marriage contract. Their conversation continues inside the mirror classroom. Minnie looks surprised. A marriage contract? Don't be ridiculous. We just met for the first time. Our families barely know each other. We're far from understanding one another, let alone liking each other. Don't you think saying something like that is incredibly abrupt? Stephen slowly bows his head. Beautiful Lady Minnie, as a direct descendant of a distinguished family, surely you understand that marriage is about mutual interest. She lowers her voice, sounding annoyed. I'm sick and tired of hearing that family interests come first logic. Over a year ago, your brother Randon proposed to me with the same lines. Are all you sons of Duke Sorum this boring? He smiles and continues. As children of our respective families, I just wanted to align our information. I'm not an unreasonable person. You can take your time to consider my proposal. There's no need to rush a decision. We have plenty of time. After all, the greatest strength of mages like us is our logic and composure. Minnie looks away, unable to find the words to respond. Stephen suddenly takes her hand. Sometimes, because of that logic, we're misunderstood as being unexciting people. If my words just now offended you, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, Lady Minnie. I will show you my sincerity when I apologize later. Her cold expression did not shift one bit. Suddenly, Swaylin spoke up. Sweet talk is the cheapest gift you can give. People who actually give a damn show it with their wallets. Stephen's son and Minnie quickly stood up and bowed to her. Swaylin smirked and continued. A dragonvein sorcerer, huh? Not bad. That is a very rare talent. Stephen's son bowed slowly. I am honored by your praise, Your Highness. Swaylin continued, but I have bullied more great dragons out there than I can count. Over time, I have developed an aura that is quite threatening to them. Someone with dragon blood like you must feel pretty uncomfortable standing next to me, right? Stephen's son forced a smile. The legendary mage was willing to grant an extra slot to the Sorum family. That alone is incredibly precious. The Bloodline's reaction is nothing compared to that. Swaylin nodded. Is that so? Well, if you are ever struggling, just say the word. After all, the Sorum family did not just pay half, as agreed they covered the entire sponsorship fee. Stephen's son thought to himself, just how many dragons had to die at this woman's hands to create such a powerful, reversed dragon pressure? It is an absolute honor to be your student, Your Highness. A faint smile played on Swaylin's lips. How has Sam been lately? Has he reached the legendary rank yet? He answered immediately. My father successfully ascended to the legendary realm at the end of last year. She looked surprised. Oh? Then I should congratulate him. What is his class specialization? Stephen's son replied solemnly. He is a magic-breaking shadow warrior, Your Highness. The system then explained the magic-breaking shadow warrior class. Swaylin quickly added, a warrior who possesses both a powerful physique and dark energy. They have an incredibly high resistance to all forms of magic. Stephen's son slowly lowered his head. His closing speed was incredibly fast. A natural enemy of mages, she said with a hint of irony. So he actually chose to be a magic-breaking shadow warrior? I thought he would pick the Holy Judgment Warrior class, which suited him best. But yes, that was my father's final choice. Swaylin thought, that Sorum guy, huh? It seems the beating I gave him back then really left him traumatized. Popovich added, how interesting. It looks like I will have to find some time this trip to visit my old friend, your father. Swaylin said in a serious tone, Stephen's son, you are my student now, but I am busy right now and do not have time to train you. Popovich, I am leaving their future arrangements to you. He replied, leave it to me, Your Highness. She smiled and continued, the higher-ups have planned a very tight schedule for this trip, so it might take a while. I originally intended to meet the new students for the first time today and have a proper talk with Richard. Popovich added, who would have thought that kid would go and get sick? She shook her head in frustration. There is no helping it then. Popovich, keep a close eye on him for me this new semester. It seems Stephen's son could not find anything else to say. He quickly nodded. Please rest easy, Your Highness. I will handle everything perfectly. Report to me immediately if anything happens with him. A week later, the first signs of autumn appeared. At that moment, inside a very quiet building, Richard was carefully writing in a book. He thought to himself, as for Minnie and Stephen's son, you two can just go ahead and enjoy your magical school life. Yes, Your Highness. The system announced, diameter of 76. The center has a group of closed-loop paths, totaling 2 to 3 rounds, 12 to 15 radial lines, 8 to 10 curved and zigzag lines. The core pattern area covers about 20 to 25% of the surface, with radiation taking up 75 to 80%. Richard thought. The new semester has added so many subjects. Lately, there has been less time for magic circle creation. I will use my true sight to analyze all the data of this legendary magic map. The system announced, body measurement, 36. Richard was stunned. 36? Aaron suddenly spoke up. Dinner is served, young master. Richard's cheeks suddenly flushed red. What kind of messed up true sight was this? Aaron's eyes widened. Young master, are you feeling okay? You've been mumbling nothing but numbers to yourself for a while now. Richard replied awkwardly. It is nothing. So, what is for dinner today? He looked at the food on the table in surprise. Is this just normal food? Aaron leaned in and whispered in his ear. The young lady said that from now on, I do not need to feed Master Richard too many energy boosters anymore. She is afraid you will not be able to handle it, like last time. Richard quickly turned his head away. That is because you put way too much stuff in last week. She smiled. If you need them, young master, I can still adjust the recipe. He quickly shook his head. That is enough. I do not need it. She adjusted her collar. I did as you asked, young master. I am wearing more modest clothes now. Richard replied sheepishly. That is not what I meant. You cannot just wear that and go running outside, can you? Aaron frowned and continued. Of course not. I only wear this outfit when I am taking care of you. He became flustered. All right. I need to eat quickly. I have a lot of homework to finish after this. She tilted her head slowly. Actually, young master, I know a little bit about magic. Would you like me to help you finish some of it? Richard looked over at her. So you have studied magic before, too? Aaron's voice carried a hint of confidence. I already had a solid foundation before I came here, and I have spent an entire year studying at this academy. In my free time, I even took a few advanced training courses. Her system status popped up. Body temperature, 36.7 degrees. Mana level, approaching level 3. Richard could not hide his surprise. Her mana was already nearing level 3, Aaron continued. That is not all. I am also quite the expert at gathering information. I wanted to understand you better, so I did some digging. Even though you do not have many friends, I knew this intel would be vital. Especially regarding the students you usually hang out with. Did you know? The biggest clan backing them is Richard suddenly cut her off. Oh, that is right. Master Popovic mentioned that last week's orientation was supposed to be a gathering for students of legendary mages. I missed it because I was sick. I heard there is a new transfer student named Steven Sunday. Since he is an outsider who came here to learn magic, Master Popovich arranged for him to study at a different location. I have never met him, and I am honestly curious about what kind of person he is. Word is, his family lineage is incredibly unique. Is there any way you could look into him for me? At those words, Aaron's eyes instantly lit up. She held out her hand. 1 gold coin. Richard blinked, confused. Huh? Aaron smirked. That is my fee for gathering intelligence. An intel officer has to have principles, you know. Just then, the massive clock hands ticked forward. Aaron started panicking and bolted toward the door. Crap. I spent so much time looking after young Master Richard that I almost lost track of time. It is getting dark. I am barely going to make the curfew. Suddenly, she slammed into someone on the street. Sorry. Steven's son spoke up. Wait. He lowered his voice. You are Aaron, aren't you? She turned around, eyes wide with shock. What? How do you know who I am? Steven's son replied. Oh, I know much more than just your name. I know your true identity. His tone was dripping with sarcasm. The little maid serving by Richard's side. As he spoke, the orange glow of the sunset draped over the horizon. Aaron kept running as fast as she could, her footsteps echoing against the long stone stairs. But she could not get Steven's son out of her head. She thought to herself, that guy is dangerous. The way he looked right through me. I need to be more careful than ever. Aaron realized she was being cornered on her way back. Her only option was to use a teleportation circle, even if it meant wasting that gold coin she just earned. She looked down at the coin in her palm, her expression darkening. But right then, a flash of light erupted directly in front of Steven Sunday. He had appeared before her again. Miss Aaron, are you really so desperate to avoid me that you would waste a teleportation spell? For someone in your position, that is a heavy price to pay. Steven's son tried to sound soothing. There is no need to be afraid, Aaron. I am not going to hurt you. I just want to talk and offer you a deal. He tossed a heavy pouch toward her. There are 200 gold coins in there, he said, his figure looming in the shadows. I haven't introduced myself properly. I am Stephen Sunday, one of the heirs to the Sorum family. I am sure that name rings a bell. He stared at her intently. Our family records have some interesting notes regarding your past, so I think it is time we have a little chat. Erin stayed silent, her eyes filled with suspicion. Stephen's son continued, I have done my homework on your situation. But what surprises me is that the Archimond family keeps you so close to Richard. You two seem quite intimate. A smirk played on his lips. A girl with your background getting tangled up in the schemes of great houses. It is never simple, is it? Erin hissed. Let go of me. Stephen's son raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Like I said, I am not here to hurt you. This gold is just a gesture of good faith. If you agree to cooperate, you can leave your current life behind for good. You will have a much better future. Erin looked at the bag of gold and then back at him. What do you want? Stephen's son replied, It is simple. Side with me. Become my assistant. With your talents, it will be a piece of cake. In exchange, you will get your freedom and the status you deserve. He spoke slowly, trying to break her down mentally. Isn't this what you have always wanted? Suddenly, a magical barrier materialized in midair. The barrier knocked his hand away. Stephen's son jumped back, startled. Who is there? Minnie's cold voice cut through the air. It seems the Sorum family's way of doing things is just as obnoxious as ever. Stephen's son looked over, stunned to see her. I didn't expect you to show up here. Minnie replied. I was just passing by. But I couldn't ignore this pathetic scene. He regained his composure. You have got it all wrong. I was just offering her a deal. Minnie glanced at Erin and then back at him. The way you work does not look much like a fair trade to me. Stephen's son let out a small laugh. Fine, let us get straight to the point then. This involves Richard Archimond. Minnie's expression shifted the moment she heard that name. Stephen's son continued. I am sure you catch my drift. Over the past year, things haven't been easy for the Neo family. Your lands are under threat, and your enemies are growing stronger, and leading the charge is none other than Viscount Ali Archimond. If this conflict keeps up, it won't be long before Richard's father, Marquis Gaton Archimond, steps in personally. When that happens, even with the Sorum family's backing, the tide will be impossible to turn. Old memories flooded back, causing Minnie to waver for a split second. Stephen's son continued. I know you reported my brother 1 year ago just to strip the Sorum family's influence from Deep Blue. If I were in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. It only proves that you and I are both calculating people. So at this point, you should understand which choice is actually in your best interest. If you blow this chance, it is not just the marriage contract between our families that becomes worthless. I am afraid the Neo family will also lose their standing in the future. At that point, he paused for a beat before continuing. You will not be any different from Erin. Those words made the atmosphere turn heavy. Minnie clenched her fists, but did not say a word. 1 month later at the academy, the students were buzzing. The monthly exam results were out, and some were too nervous to even look. These grades would directly affect their future mage rankings. Then, everyone's eyes shifted to the leaderboard at the same time. Just as expected, Richard was at the top. Someone could not believe it. Did he cheat? How can he be this good? Someone else immediately shot back. The instructors already said he has had the strength of a level 3 mage for a while now. Plus, he is the student of a legendary mage, so being number 1 is not surprising at all. Dee walked over with a smile. Congratulations, Richard. You took first place again. Richard only gave a short reply, and then suddenly asked, Sister, why haven't I seen Erin lately? Where did she go? Dee thought for a moment and replied, Erin said she was not feeling well and requested leave. It has already been reported to Gordon. Right now, the priority is still your studies, so letting her rest a bit more is fine. As for exactly where she went, I am not really sure. Even without Erin, your daily life is still being fully taken care of. Hearing that, Richard went quiet for a moment, his gaze darkening slightly. He looked up at the sky, a sudden sense of emptiness washing over him. At Deep Blue, besides Popovich, the person who made him feel most at ease, seemed to be only Erin. He whispered to himself, where did she go? A feeling he could not quite name flashed through his heart, as if he were missing something familiar that he had never noticed before. The castle appeared with its ancient, grand glory. Inside, the classroom was already filled with the captivating voice of the great master painter. He began talking about the statue of Venus, an eternal icon of ancient sculpture, where beauty is not just about the form, but also the perfect balance of every proportion. According to him, The statue's body follows the standards the ancients worshipped. From the ratio of the head to the body, the shoulders to the waist, down to the length of the limbs, everything reached a level of near absolute harmony. That is the law of balanced opposition, a full body that is not heavy, soft, yet maintaining a sense of dignity. It embodies the aesthetic ideal that the ancient Greeks pursued. He continued, emphasizing that Venus's beauty does not just come from perfection, but also from the missing pieces. Those long-lost arms unintentionally opened up a space for infinite imagination, making the artwork stay alive through the centuries. But while the whole class was immersed in the lecture, Richard was completely losing focus. He was pulled back to reality when the great master painter suddenly called his name, his voice tinged with a bit of sarcasm. It was clear he had noticed Richard's daydreaming. Under the pressure of the entire class's gaze, Richard felt a bit awkward, but still stood up and admitted he was distracted. At the same time, he explained that he already had a certain understanding of this statue. The classroom immediately buzzed with noise. Some were curious, while others were secretly doubtful. But right after that, Richard began his presentation. He spoke about the statue's height being about 2 meters. Its structure assembled from 2 blocks of marble. The seam is located between the torso and the draped cloth. He then analyzed the head-to-body ratio, which nearly hits the ideal standard of Laios's rules. All of this shows that this is the complete model of classical aesthetics. During that lesson, while everyone else was still confused by abstract aesthetic concepts, Richard left the entire class stunned. He did not just understand it. He analyzed the statue in extreme detail, from the body being divided by the golden ratio, using the navel as the perfect dividing point, to how the entire form is organized into 3 balanced parts as a visual rule. He did not stop there. Richard also pointed out the soul of the statue, the soft S-curve, with the weight shifted to one side. The body twists slightly, creating a feeling that is both fluid and stable, all blending into a balanced beauty that is almost perfect. The whole class went silent. Some even had their mouths hanging open in shock. Even the great master painter could not hide his surprise. He bluntly admitted that what Richard said was even deeper than his own lecture. A rare compliment echoed through the room, bringing both admiration and some uncomfortable stares. Because everyone could see one thing: this kid was too outstanding. So outstanding that it made others feel uneasy, brilliant, far beyond his years. And because of that, for the past 1 year, almost no one truly wanted to get close to him. But at that moment, Richard did not care about what others thought. He only had one person on his mind. Images of Erin kept flashing back from the first time they met to the weekends she quietly prepared his meals, or the times she gently offered to help him relax after exhausting school days. The more he remembered, the heavier his heart became. By the time class wrapped up, he was still hunkered down in the library, unable to focus on a single word. Time just slipped away until he was finally told it was time to clear out. As night fell, the silence became so heavy it was almost bone-chilling. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of footsteps echoed through the air. Richard immediately went on high alert. It was way past curfew. Nobody should have been out at this hour. Right then, the system in his head pinged. A series of familiar stats popped up: height, build. It was a near-perfect match. In an instant, Richard's eyes shot wide. It was her. It was Erin. Without a second thought, he bolted after her, shouting her name. He tried to get her to stop, but Erin just turned and ran like she was desperate to avoid him. Left with no choice, Richard had to take action. He cast a low-level spell, just enough to trip her up and keep her from getting away. Erin tumbled to the ground. He rushed over and grabbed her, his voice frantic and filled with worry. She'd been gone for a whole month without a single word of explanation. He couldn't wrap his head around what was happening, but Erin's reaction was ice-cold and distant. She shoved his hands away and told him to let go, acting as if they'd never even been close. That's when Richard noticed something was off. The bruises on her neck, her racing heartbeat, and the way her eyes were swirling with suppressed emotion. It was obvious she was suffering. His expression darkened instantly, and his voice took on a much sharper edge. He grilled her for the truth, but Erin only gave him one answer. This was her choice. She needed the money, and she wanted out of her current life. Richard nearly lost it. He told her he could help, that his entire family could step in for her if she'd just let them. But Erin just gave a slight shake of her head, her eyes a mix of calm resolve and deep pain. Then, she let out a half-finished sentence. "I don't want to earn." Her words cut through the air like a silent blade. The story then shifts back to a late evening when Erin unexpectedly showed up to demand her money back from Richard. Before the tension could even settle, someone else barged in. They curiously asked why on earth Richard was hanging around the dorms at this hour. To make matters worse, Stephen's son jumped at the chance to play nice, buttering him up while trying to strike up a conversation. He even bragged about being the student of a legendary mage himself. But before he could even finish his introduction, Richard coldly brushed his hand away, cutting him off entirely. Without hesitating, he turned to leave, tossing back a blunt apology, saying he just wasn't in the mood for this. Stephen's son wouldn't let it go, though. He dropped a cryptic remark that one day, Richard would be dying to know his name. Outside, night had fully taken over, with a crescent moon hanging low in the sky. In the middle of the silent academy grounds, Richard walked alone. His lonely shadow stretched across the path. He wasn't feeling peaceful at all. Instead, a slow-burning rage was simmering deep inside him. The question, "Who is that guy?" kept looping in his mind. His fists clenched, and a dark aura began to seep out, reflecting the fury building within. Then, in the blink of an eye, he took off into the night, moving so fast it sent the nearby birds into a panicked frenzy. He had only one goal: find that guy, no matter what. The next morning, the academy returned to its usual hustle and bustle. But amidst all the noise, Richard sat off by himself in a corner, his eyes heavy with thought. The memories of last night were vivid. The image of that girl coming down from the dorms kept playing on repeat. Without wasting any time, Richard started searching, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning every nook and cranny. Finally, he stopped in front of a tall building, his gaze turning certain. He was convinced that the person he was looking for was definitely one of the students at this academy. Just then, Popovich showed up, not missing a chance to tease him since they hadn't crossed paths in a while. But Richard didn't beat around the bush this time. He went straight for it, asking about something specific: a travel permit to Sunset Valley. Hearing this, Popovich's tone immediately turned dead serious. He described it as a land of shadows, a place filled with shady deals and outlaws. It wasn't the kind of place a student should be wandering into. Richard held his ground, explaining that his magic research made it absolutely necessary to go there. Even though he understood the reasoning, Popovich still couldn't give him the green light. As an instructor, he had to keep his students safe. Hearing that, Richard hung his head, admitting his request might have been a bit much. But just as he was about to walk away, Popovich stopped him in his tracks with another suggestion. If he couldn't help as a teacher, he could at least give him a lead. The person Richard needed to talk to was the new art instructor, a mysterious grandmaster painter. Richard saw a glimmer of hope. He immediately caught on to what was being implied. He gave a quick nod of thanks and headed out, already planning his next move. But before he could get far, Popovich's warning echoed behind him. In this academy, everything is under control, and no one is allowed to cross the line, not even the student of a legendary mage. Those words left Richard lost in thought. A grandmaster painter. That had to be the key. And to get close to someone like that, the only way to build a real connection was through a sincere piece of art. The scene shifts to the art classroom, where the grandmaster announces the end of the lesson, telling the students to turn in their drawings of the woman in their hearts. On the outside, he seemed gentle, but inside, he was drowning in frustration. To him, teaching a bunch of magic students who didn't understand a lick of art was nothing but a total waste of his life. If it wasn't for a bet with the prince that left him with a mountain of debt, he probably never would have set foot in this place. As he started reviewing the students' work, his exhaustion became even more obvious. One piece after another, they were so bad, he just wanted to bury his face in his hands. Finally, the Grand Master could only slap his forehead, his head spinning. It wasn't because of the art, it was because he just couldn't take it anymore. The teacher picked up a painting, and the second he saw it, he froze, his eyes wide with shock. This style was unlike anything they'd ever seen in this world. The lines were sharp, the emotions so delicate it felt like the painting had its own soul. He whispered to himself in disbelief. Was this really the work of the top student in the class? He even let Richard's name slip out, his voice shaking with astonishment. Right then, a knock at the door shattered the silence. He immediately wiped the shock off his face and barked for them to come in. Richard walked in with a cold expression and distant eyes, asking straight up why he'd been called there. The teacher didn't beat around the bush. He went straight for a deal, wanting to keep the painting for his personal collection. He began praising the work, describing every detail, like the soft light falling over the girl in the painting. Every curve was soft, pure, yet tinged with a hint of sadness, like a story waiting to be told. The more he talked, the more his obsession showed. He even admitted Richard's talent was beyond expectation, not just a genius in magic, but an incredible natural at art too. But then, his voice dropped. He mentioned the price, a travel pass to Sunset Harbor. It wasn't an ordinary place, and his tone carried a heavy warning of the consequences. Richard didn't even flinch. He calmly replied that he'd handle whatever consequences came his way. He even went as far as to point out the dark rumors about the teacher trading art containing banned magical blueprints. Those words made the teacher's face go pale instantly. He snapped back in a rage, denying everything and demanding proof. But Richard only needed to watch the man's heartbeat and reactions to know he'd hit the bullseye. He gave a slight smile, his voice remaining calm but carrying an invisible pressure, reminding the teacher that he was the student of a legendary mage. And then, there was the power of the family behind him, a family famous for their intelligence network. He slowly revealed that the trade list was already in their hands. Now, the teacher had completely lost control of the situation. His face shifted through a dozen emotions before he finally gave in. He quickly agreed to find someone to lead Richard to Sunset Harbor. His voice was full of reluctance and anxiety, like he'd been backed into a corner with no way out. Richard didn't back down. Instead, he coldly raised the price. His decisive tone left the teacher stunned. The man cursed him for being greedy, but Richard held all the cards. He calmly stated that this wasn't just about a painting anymore. The teacher had no choice but to meet his demands. Richard's sharp, cold eyes watched every tiny reaction. The teacher's body went stiff. He was clearly trapped. And then, the real request was made. He wanted to use the underground connections at Sunset Harbor to find someone who could teach him the art of assassination, a request that made the air in the room turn heavy instantly. 2 days later, at the Sunset Harbor teleportation point, Richard emerged alone in the dead of night, a place known as the land of sin and filthy deals. A sorcerer eyed him with suspicion. The man couldn't hide his surprise at the balls of this kid for stepping into a place like this. Richard just silently handed over his pass and demanded to be shown the way. From there, he was pulled into a completely different world, dark alleys crawling with outlaws. Judging eyes and shady offers were everywhere, creating a suffocating and dangerous atmosphere. Finally, he was led to meet Nia, the woman pulling the strings behind the underground trades. With just one look, she could tell Richard was no ordinary kid, someone who dared to come here to learn how to kill while staying that calm. That was enough to catch her interest. Time passed, and 1 month later, in the gloom of an underground training facility, Richard had grown used to the place. Despite being surrounded by dangerous and chaotic people, he kept his cold expression, focused entirely on his goal. Until an unexpected moment occurred, his eyes stopped when he saw the very painting he had once drawn. It was sitting on a cargo cart like a common piece of junk being traded away. For a second, the world seemed to spin before his eyes, but he quickly shoved his emotions down. The training session ended, and Naya handed him his pay. She smirked, testing him by asking if he'd ever thought about being killed, right then and there. But Richard just calmly replied that he could read people's intentions. Besides, every time he came here, he only brought enough money for the day. Killing him would bring no profit, but training him successfully? The payoff would be much greater. His sharp logic made Nia burst out laughing, but she started looking at him in a new light. Still, she warned him that an assassin doesn't just work for money, they have to weigh the risks. Richard said nothing. He quietly packed his things and left, preparing for the next steps in his plan. She had already dug into the background of Richard, a student from the Deep Blue Academy. It was a place where harmful magic was strictly forbidden on campus. That was exactly why he had to seek out this place to learn the kind of skills that stayed far away from prying eyes. Then, she asked him point blank, "Who exactly are you trying to kill?" Richard didn't give her a straight answer, only saying that he hadn't identified his target yet, but he claimed that learning here would help him find that person. His words instantly made Nia turn serious. At this point, Richard finally revealed his true objective. Beyond just dodging the Academy's surveillance, he was after something much more important. He wanted the specialized scouting techniques used by professional assassins. A unique ability that could track, sense, and prey. That very skill was the key to achieving his ultimate goal. When the teacher heard Richard's request, he froze, his eyes filled with pure shock. Because rune-based scouting wasn't something a normal teenager could even comprehend, let alone want to learn. But Richard just responded calmly, as if he had calculated everything beforehand. He believed that with the great painter's vast connections across the continent, finding the right person shouldn't be difficult at all. His voice was soft, yet it made the man break into a cold sweat. This kid wasn't just talking big, he clearly understood the man's past, from being a guest of imperial royalty to his dealings with countless legendary rune masters. The air grew heavy with tension as Richard continued his analysis. In the world of magic, rune masters are the ones who can create miracles. They are the backbone of legendary power. But at the same time, they are a massive threat to those in power. If they ever slip out of control, they could easily become the factor that destroys an entire nation. That's why every faction tries to control, recruit, and exploit them. This led to many branches of power revolving around rune masters, from rune knight legions to specialized assassination organizations. Each branch possessed a terrifying power, capable of shifting the tides of war. Hearing this, the teacher was even more shaken. He realized he couldn't hide anything from this child. Richard's knowledge and mindset were far beyond his years. It left the man with no choice but to admit it, and he began explaining the world of rune masters, where legendary weapons and gear once shaped history. They became symbols of power for the great factions, but Richard didn't stop there. He bluntly exposed how they used art as a cover to smuggle rune blueprints, turning it into a tool for trading favors. His words cut like a knife into a weak spot, leaving the teacher with no choice but to make excuses, claiming it was all just to pay off debts. However, Richard immediately shut him down, stating that the academy strictly forbade such things. Cornered, the teacher was finally forced to compromise. He revealed that besides the Rune Knights, there was another branch that handled top-secret missions. Those were the assassination organizations, and the scouting techniques Richard wanted to learn originated from them. Then, he suggested a name, a retired assassin who had gone into hiding, the only person who could teach him. The moment that name was spoken, Richard realized Nia's true identity, but immediately after, he kept the pressure on. He mentioned how members of assassination organizations usually had bounties on their heads everywhere, and if word got out, that person's life would definitely never be peaceful again. He didn't need to raise his voice, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a request anymore, it was a trap that had already been set. A game where Richard held all the cards. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, Nia's voice suddenly rang out. Her tone carried a mix of curiosity and respect. It was clear she saw that Richard was no ordinary kid. She even seemed to take a liking to him, bluntly raising the fee for their next meeting to 500 gold coins, just to prioritize teaching him the rune scouting arts, a sum that would make any normal person's head spin. But even though Nia wanted the money, she was honest with him. Just learning how to draw the designs was useless. Since she had left the organization long ago, without the specific charms and base materials provided by a rune master, the technique wouldn't even work. Her gaze turned sharp and cold, as if testing him, but Richard didn't flinch. He simply replied, with total composure, "Don't worry about that. Because sooner or later, I'm going to become a rune master myself." 1 month later, his hard work finally paid off. The system in his head was constantly analyzing the structure of the spell arrays, from the positioning frames and guidance charms to the link tracking mechanisms. It all slowly came together into his very own version of the scouting technique. Meanwhile, on the outside, Day began to notice some strange changes. Richard was becoming more reclusive, often disappearing at night, and he'd even borrowed a large sum of money, which made her highly suspicious. Until finally, an excited shout echoed from inside the room. Richard walked out looking exhausted, but his eyes were glowing with excitement. It was obvious he'd just made a major breakthrough. Inside his mind, everything from a month of non-stop experimentation finally clicked into place. After tweaking every single detail of the charms, he had finally successfully copied the scouting technique, using the target's traces to create a link. He had turned it into a sort of early warning system that would trigger whenever the target appeared nearby. Even though his current efficiency was only at 50% due to limited materials, it was more than enough to prove his direction was spot on. To go any further, there was only one path left. He had to become an official rune master. Without wasting a second, Richard tracked down Popovich and dropped a bombshell. He wanted to start his journey as a rune master right then and there. Normally, you have to hit a specific magic rank to even qualify for the position, but Richard made it clear. His true power had surpassed those limits ages ago. He just hadn't had the chance for an official promotion. He wasn't about to waste another second. His unwavering confidence left Popovich in deep thought. Eventually, the old man decided to help, writing a recommendation for Richard to see the Academy's top Grand Rune, but he warned him, there are 0 exceptions for anyone, no matter who you are. But Richard had one more surprise up his sleeve. He turned down the prep work, claiming he'd already finished the introductory blueprints. Moments later, he was standing in the middle of a massive crowd at the registration desk. Everyone there was clinging to the hope of becoming a rune master, but Richard just watched them in silence. Suddenly, a warning signal blared in his mind. Something he'd created was reacting. His eyes snapped wide open, and he immediately began tracking the source. Amidst a pile of cluttered items, he spotted something familiar, a trace of Lynn. But what really made him freeze was the name engraved on the accompanying tag, Stephen Sunday. 2 days later, the entire city was bathed in the golden hues of autumn, but the academy was more heated than ever. The final results for the Rune Master department were finally being posted. The hallways were packed with students gossiping. Some were ecstatic because they'd actually made the cut, while others were devastated after failing yet again. One guy had failed 7 times and still couldn't let go of that dying hope. The air was thick with tension and bitterness. Everyone knew that being a Rune Master wasn't for the masses. It was a cutthroat competition between the Academy's elite geniuses. In the crowd, one man lamented that he was nearly 30 and still couldn't satisfy the Grand Mage's standards. Another tried to comfort himself by saying even the upperclassmen, magic interns, were failing left and right. Just as the chatter reached a fever pitch, all eyes suddenly shifted toward Richard. A sophomore who was only at level 2 actually dared to enter the registration area? The crowd erupted into whispers. Some suspected he was getting special treatment because he was the student of a legendary mage. Others sneered, convinced someone at his level could never pass the test. Richard didn't give them the time of day, he just quietly held his envelope. When he tore it open, a soft glow flickered. The message was simple, but it changed the entire vibe of the room. He'd passed. He was ordered to report to room 3 of the teaching building at 3 in the afternoon for the next phase of the assessment. Right on time, Richard stepped into the Rune Master classroom. It was quiet, but the atmosphere felt incredibly heavy. Sunlight filtered through the glass, creating an eerie, blurred glow. Before long, 2 other figures appeared. One was Stephen's son, and the other was Minnie. Richard stiffened for a second. Neither of them were strangers to him. Stephen's son spoke first, acting calm as if they were old friends. Minnie remained cold, though she couldn't hide the fact that she was watching him closely. The tension between the 3 of them was through the roof. That's when Finn stepped in to explain the situation. This year's results were unprecedented. For the first time in 10 years, 3 people had met the standard. Richard was taken aback. He hadn't expected the list to be that short. But what really caught his attention was Stephen's son, the only person whose exam work had carried a trace of Lynn. When Finn confirmed all 3 were students of legendary mages, Richard realized the web of connections was far more tangled and complicated than he'd ever imagined. As he was processing this, Stephen's son suddenly stepped forward and introduced himself. The youngest son of the Soramu family. His voice was calm, but it carried a crushing weight of authority. Richard's hands clenched into fists. Memories of everything that had happened came rushing back. A cold, heavy bloodlust unconsciously leaked from his body, making even Stephen's son pause for a beat. In that moment, the entire room went dead silent. It was a silent showdown between the 2, with a new determination hardening in Richard's eyes, something even he couldn't fully control. Suddenly, Stephen's son broke the silence. He called out Minnie's name, demanding she confirm their marriage alliance right there in front of everyone. Those few words made Minnie's face drop instantly. She went cold, clearly cornered by a situation she wasn't ready for. Grand Mage Finn was about to announce the next part of the results, but she cut him off. Minnie asked for a moment. She kept her voice polite, but she was clearly taking control of the room. Then, she unexpectedly stepped forward and grabbed Stephen's son's hand as a public confirmation. She announced their relationship to the world, emphasizing it was an alliance between the Neo and Soramu families. She even invited Finn to their engagement ceremony the following day. This news instantly shifts the vibe in the room, making everyone go dead silent. Finn is also momentarily surprised, but he quickly offers his congratulations, since this is clearly a massive deal between 2 powerful families. Minnie even goes as far as inviting Richard to the event, causing his eyes to cloud over for a second as if he's reconsidering everything. Stephen's son speaks up next, his attitude calm, but his eyes sharp and observant. He emphasizes that Minnie has already agreed to the engagement, calling it a matter of honor between their families before inviting everyone to share in their joy. Meanwhile, Richard stands still for a beat, his mind racing as he reanalyzes the entire situation. His suspicions about Aaron, the magic marks he found earlier, and that initial gut feeling of something being off are all being dragged back up for scrutiny. He tells himself he might have been too hasty, especially considering the way the nobility operates. An alliance like this could completely rule out the possibility of either of them personally moving against a low-level slave. Right then, Finn speaks up to break the mounting tension, reminding everyone to focus back on the core of the evaluation. He says bluntly that the rune constructs they submitted are all just beginner level, but there's still a clear gap in quality between them. Instead of just giving out grades, he decides to run a live experiment to judge their runic capabilities in a more direct way. The moment the word experiment is mentioned, Richard immediately goes on high alert. Suddenly, the space in front of them opens up, magic light spills out, and the group is led into the testing area. Before them stands a restrained test subject, a creature used to measure the effectiveness of their rune designs. Stats for speed, reaction time, and physical changes after applying the runes are displayed clearly, turning the whole test into a vivid, real-time comparison. Richard watches the scene, a wave of discomfort washing over him, because what Finn calls an experiment is actually using a living being as a guinea pig. Minnie is evaluated first, and the results show her rune efficiency is decent, though it only hits about 20% optimization. This leaves her a bit confused, as she doesn't quite understand why her ranking is lower than she expected. Finn explains that his preliminary assessment was based on her design structure and the data he'd observed earlier. He wants his students to understand that the true nature of runes isn't just on paper, it has to be proven through actual results. Right after that, the names of Stephen's son and Richard are called, signaling it's time for the next round of testing. Stephen's son confidently declares that he used high-grade materials, specifically premium dragon hide, to guarantee he takes the top spot. Meanwhile, Richard stays quiet, his eyes glued to the entire testing system as it operates. The air in the room becomes as tense as a pulled bowstring. As the main testing phase officially begins, and the real results are forced into the light, there's no more room for guesswork. Stephen's son looks at Richard, his gaze still filled with suspicion following the previous part of the test. He asks a question as if trying to confirm something, but Richard just gives a slight shake of his head, saying he's fine, just feeling a bit unsteady on his feet. But inside his head, things are far from simple. The runes he placed on the test subject were supposed to have a certain level of reaction, even if it was just a 50% probability. Yet this time, it was a total blank, not a single familiar signal appeared. That feeling makes Richard start to realize one thing. The person he'd been suspecting from the start might not be the one after all. On the other side, Stephen's son begins to notice something strange in Richard's eyes, causing his own expression to flicker for a moment. Right then, a loud shout echoes from the testing field, announcing the results. 5 laps of 400 meters clocked in at 8 minutes and 4 seconds, a speed increase of over 33%. Hearing this, Minnie lets out a small frown, while Stephen's son gives a soft, dissatisfied chuckle. He nonchalantly remarks that the result didn't meet his expectations, though he admits it's acceptable for a first-time structural test. At the same time, the system calls out Richard's name. The next test subject is brought out to the evaluation zone. The moment Richard hears his name, he freezes, and his gaze sharpens instantly. Standing before him is a centaur-like creature, its eyes cold and vacant, as if it's long since grown used to being treated like a tool. The light of the runes shines down and the trial begins. From the sidelines, Finn watches the data and gives a calm critique. Richard's design uses very ordinary beast hide, honestly. It's almost the lowest grade possible. However, the acceleration trigger is remarkably stable, and the efficiency isn't lagging behind the designs using premium materials at all. Stephen's son hears this and immediately scoffs to himself, thinking his premium dragon hide can't possibly be compared to that trashy beast skin. He's certain the top result will still be his, but when the final numbers are announced, the atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. 8 minutes and 5 seconds, with a speed increase of 33% matching Stephen's son's result exactly. The advantage of the expensive materials has been completely wiped out. Minnie froze in her tracks, while Stephen's son couldn't hide his utter shock. He couldn't wrap his head around how a blueprint made from such trashy, low-grade materials could actually match the performance of his premium dragon skin. Phi finally spoke up to explain, noting that the secret wasn't the materials themselves, but the way the runes were harmonized and the surgical precision of the entire structure. Richard had managed to completely overcome the limitations of the materials through his sheer mastery of rune construction. This, Phi remarked, is the true essence of a grandmaster. Those words left Stephen's son speechless for a long moment. Meanwhile, Richard kept his eyes fixed on the test subject, but his gaze had grown noticeably heavier and more intense. Phi continued his analysis, pointing out that while Stephen's son's result was slightly faster in terms of raw time, his structure had caused a nasty side effect. The test subject's body had been overstimulated to the point of extreme pain and instability. On the flip side, while Richard's design wasn't tuned for absolute speed, it maintained a perfect balance between efficiency and safety. This, Phi concluded, was the standard of a real grandmaster. Richard was officially declared the top performer of the entire selection process. As the final declaration was made, a glowing ring of light instantly materialized to broadcast the results. But despite what should have been a moment of glory, Steven's son and Minnie were losing their cool in the background. Steven's son gritted his teeth, realizing their original plan had been blown to pieces from the very first step, and that Richard had caught on to something far beyond what they'd anticipated. He began re-evaluating the entire situation. From that nagging feeling of being watched to the strange reactions during the exam, he concluded that Richard was definitely not just some ordinary student. Standing beside him, Minnie started to panic, realizing their marriage alliance was now in serious jeopardy. Steven's son finally made a call. If they had been found out earlier than expected, the only option left was to scrap the plan and pivot entirely. He needed to deal with this problem before it had a chance to spiral out of control. Meanwhile, Sunset Alley was swallowed by the dim, flickering light of the night. People moved through the shadows like hurried ghosts, their faces obscured. Aaron hurried through the crowd, stopping in front of a decrepit old shop and speaking in a low voice, sounding like someone who had been there many times before. The shopkeeper shot her a look and asked bluntly if she had brought enough for the deposit this time. Aaron didn't say much. She just placed a heavy bag of gold on the table, coldly confirming that the deposit was paid in full as agreed. As for the travel permits to the southern continent, those would be paid off in installments. Elsewhere, Steven's son was drowning in a fit of uncontrollable rage. He couldn't stomach the fact that a lowly, second-tier student like Richard could create something that defied all his expectations. He thought he had prepared everything perfectly, even enlisting a level 7 mage like Minnie to back him with the best resources money could buy. They had run hundreds of tests just to get a rune that was 33% complete, and yet they still got outperformed. That failure made him suspect immediately that Richard wasn't acting alone. There had to be someone else pulling the strings. That suspicion quickly curdled into murderous intent as he turned his gaze toward Aaron. He demanded to know if she was hiding anything from him. Aaron could only offer the limited info she had on Richard's schedule, which Daisy had arranged. Since she'd been told to cut all contact with Richard, she didn't have many chances to get close to him anymore. But Steven's son wasn't having it. He absolutely snapped. He lunged at her, pinning her down against the table and reminding her of her place as a slave and the absolute power he held over her life. His words were so icy and cruel that Aaron could only endure the abuse in silence, tears streaming down her face. He declared that she had to be completely submissive if she ever wanted the status and rewards he had promised her. As he left, Steven's son suddenly changed his tactics. He ordered Aaron to keep getting close to Richard, but this time, it wasn't about hiding. He wanted her to tell him the truth, that the person she was in contact with wasn't actually him. At the same time, he told her to prepare for another staged performance at a time and place he would set. In his mind, Richard was no longer a simple target, and everything had to be handled with extreme care. The next morning, warm sunlight poured over the city, making it seem like everything was back to normal. But beneath that bright surface, the schemes and plots had already shifted in a completely different direction. Richard stood in silence, his eyes fixed on the unfinished lines of analysis running through his head. The rune structures still hadn't reached a state of perfection. Even though the layout was nearly a perfect fit, the actual performance was hitting a hard limit. Specifically, because he was restricted to using basic animal hides, the entire scouting system couldn't break past the 50% mark that the true theory required. He had to admit that if he wanted to go any further, the only way was to upgrade his materials. That meant he had to achieve even higher results in his structural research just to earn the right to access better resources. In Richard's mind, everything was narrowing down to one single point. His teacher had repeatedly told him he was far beyond the level of a normal student, even hinting that Richard was hiding something much bigger than he realized. Those compliments, laced with subtle warnings, didn't make him feel more confident. Instead, they made him start to doubt who he really was. When Finn commented that Richard's practical work was far too perfect for a second-year student, Richard shot the idea down immediately. But Finn didn't stop there. He brought up His Highness, describing him as the invisible hand pulling all the strings within this academy. It's a place where every talent is forced into a pre-arranged system. Then Finn laid it out straight. At Deep Blue, being a rune master isn't just about academics. It's a tool for power, backed and handpicked by the entire system. Having talent doesn't mean you get to move forward. Only those who align with the will of the elites are ever truly recognized. In that moment, the image of Stephen's son flashed in his mind, sharp and irritating like a thorn he couldn't ignore. Even though his runes had never reacted to the guy before, Richard's gut still couldn't shake this deep sense of unease. Then, suddenly, his body gave a slight shiver. The runes in his palm pulsed harder than usual, like a signal had just been triggered. Richard whipped his head around, his eyes scanning the room. He thought of Erin. Without a second thought, he bolted out the door and screamed her name. But all that answered him was the empty silence of the hallway. Right before his eyes, a scrap of paper sat there, silent as if everything had been perfectly orchestrated. 3 days flew by faster than Erin expected, yet they felt heavy, like she was being dragged through the darkness. Stephen's son's voice kept echoing in her head about their meeting on Sunday night, exactly when the streets would be most deserted. He even forced her to show up 1 hour early, as if every single detail had been meticulously calculated in advance. He chose a spot right by the western wall leading out of the city, a place so lonely that if anything happened, no one would ever find her in time. Erin was terrified and disgusted, but she couldn't say no. That sinking feeling in her gut only grew, and she couldn't understand what Stephen's son was actually planning. On the other side, Stephen's son had already started putting his plan into motion. He tracked down Papin, a man who had been kicked out of Deep Blue Academy after a past scandal. He was a man consumed by hatred and a long-standing mental breakdown. To Stephen's son, Papin was nothing more than a tool to be used. He was a fuse ready to explode, and Erin was just another pawn in his game. As long as he hit his target, anyone could be thrown away. That night, Erin was dragged right into the nightmare she feared. In the middle of the chaos, she was pinned down, her body becoming weak and helpless. Papin's face showed the twisted desperation of a man pushed to the edge, filled with pure hatred as he waited for his revenge. He started rambling about the past, the academy, and everything that had ruined his life, turning it all into a dangerous, distorted obsession. Then Richard appeared. The moment he saw the scene in front of him, a killing intent surged within him, nearly spinning out of control. Without a single thought, he charged straight at Papin. Every bit of logic and every warning about the academy rules were tossed aside. At first, Papin just gave a cold smirk, thinking Richard wouldn't actually dare to act, but he was immediately flattened by a barrage of attacks. Blood began to spray, and the air turned into pure chaos. Meanwhile, Richard kept striking, looking like he was losing his mind. His only thought was to crush the enemy in front of him. Amidst all the violence, Erin lay on the ground, frail and terrified. Her vision was fading, but she still tried to look toward Richard. Then, in that split second, Stephen's son's words about a play flashed in her mind. She suddenly snapped awake, realizing that everything was being pushed toward a deadly script that no one could stop. Richard stood there, horrified by the scene before him, stammering Erin's name. By now, Erin was lying in the middle of the mess, her clothes torn, looking utterly helpless. Richard asked in confusion, why did she save him? She replied that this had nothing to do with him. Richard was stunned and cried out, "That's impossible." Then Erin screamed, "Just get out of here. I did all of this of my own free will." Tears pooled in her eyes, her cheeks flushing red. "Do you see it clearly now? This is the real me." Richard froze, unable to believe his eyes. Erin yelled again, "Go. Attacking someone in the academy is a major crime. If you don't leave, you'll be caught." He wept in agony, able to do nothing but grit his teeth. Then, Richard turned and stumbled away. Erin lowered her head and whispered, "I stopped belonging to you a long time ago." The next day, in Stephen's son's room, he was baffled. He asked, "What? No one was injured?" The man across from him replied, "That's right, Master Stephen. Last night, we didn't find any signs of a struggle at all." Hearing that, he roared in fury, "That's impossible. Go back and confirm it right now." The man rushed off, saying, "Yes, Master, I'll go immediately." Stephen's son was livid, his face twisting into a hideous scowl. There was no way his plan could have failed. He had spent a fortune bribing Papin, a man who loathed Richard. He used Papin's former status as a student and his abilities to sneak him into the academy. The goal was to have Erin brutalized right in front of Richard to trigger his murderous rage. Papin was absolutely no match for Richard. If a murder happened, Richard would be finished. He would be expelled from the academy and branded a killer. I felt that killing intent. I know I wasn't wrong. So how did he not even use magic? Did that guy use some other trick? Suddenly, Minnie, standing by the window, spoke up. "Women aren't that easy to control." He glanced over at Minnie and snapped, "What did you say?" She told him, I never had high hopes for a plan that relied on that woman. You shouldn't be so cocky about your own abilities. Stephen was speechless. Miss Minnie, hold on to this cursed artifact. I have already arranged for the assassins to move in. The target is Archimond Richard. He told that dragonskin girl not to act so smart. Do not forget that in Deep Blue, nobody can kill someone without being caught. What if the assassins get caught and sell us out? Minnie suddenly spoke up, cutting him off. Who said I was going to kill him? Stephen stood there, stunned. She glanced down at the dragon skin with those strange markings. What I want is his blood, to use as a catalyst for the runes on this cursed gear. Meanwhile, 2 students were chatting away happily. Once I head back to the dorms and drop off my books, let's meet at the field. Yeah, man, see you in a bit. Suddenly, an angry voice boomed from upstairs. No more skipping class. Minnie continued. Richard has been playing hooky for 3 days straight now. Being absent without a good excuse will only lead to trouble with the school. For someone like Richard, who has always been a top student, getting disciplined like that will seriously tank his future ranking as a mage. On top of that, Richard is the student of a legendary mage. This could ruin his entire future. She replied, feeling completely helpless. I get it, but... She thought back to what the maid had said. Young Master Richard, please open the door. It has been 3 days since he has let me bring him any food. She explained with a worried look. Richard has locked himself in his room and will not see anyone. We have no idea what happened to him 3 nights ago. Inside the dark room, everything was a mess. Furniture and papers were scattered everywhere. Richard sat huddled in a corner, staring at his trembling hands. The events of that night played back vividly in his mind. Richard squeezed his shaking hands, his clothes disheveled. All he could feel was that raw urge to kill from that night. Suddenly, the image of Aaron in pain, being toyed with by those thugs, flashed before his eyes. Richard was paralyzed with fear. It was like a nightmare. Aaron, his whole body began to shake. Suddenly, glass shattered, and something was thrown into his room. Startled, he sat up to see what it was. A strange, glowing circle appeared on someone's palm. Richard wondered, is this Aaron's energy? He was shocked to realize they were her clothes. He immediately threw open the window. Seeing a figure down below, Richard thought it was Aaron. He stood there frozen for a moment. He doubted himself. How is that even possible? Remembering her words made the pain even worse. I haven't belonged to you for a long time, Richard asked himself. Why? The sound of his frantic footsteps echoed through the dead of night. Richard was chasing the woman who looked like Aaron, desperately wondering, where did she go? Suddenly, he felt confused and shocked when he saw where she was heading. Richard realized, that is toward the outer city walls. Seeing this, he rushed after her and yelled, wait! Suddenly, the figure stopped, as if she were waiting for him. Richard shouted, Aaron, is that you? His eyes widened in absolute shock. Without a moment's hesitation, the person jumped. Looking down from the top, Richard screamed. He saw the figure vanish deep into the forest and cried out, Aaron! While Richard was distracted, someone crept up behind him and pushed him off without a second thought. Richard fell from the massive wall, screaming in terror. Luckily, a tree branch caught him. He quickly grabbed onto it for dear life. His body swung in the air in the middle of the woods. Richard clung to the branch, but then someone appeared right in front of him, lunging with murderous intent. The person ruthlessly sliced through the branch. Richard was knocked back by the shattering wood. He reached out his hand, and a green circle appeared. Level 3 magic. Counterwind. Dust and debris flew everywhere as he managed a 57% instant cast rate. The dark figure appeared in the trees. This kid is pretty good. He actually pulled off a magic circle that fast. The man swung his sword at Richard. I guess you really are the student of that legendary mage. Luckily, thanks to his quick reflexes, he managed to dodge it. Richard was furious, his fingers digging into the dirt. Richard's eyes suddenly flashed with light, and then a massive flame erupted from his hand. Level 4 magic. Forest fire. Richard screamed, "Who the hell are you?" In an instant, the forest was engulfed in flames. Richard bolted through the fire. He wondered to himself, is this revenge? Thinking back to that night, he thought it was because of what happened before. Suddenly, the perspective shifted. Someone was watching him from the trees. The person praised him. This kid has a sharp head on his shoulders. Then, May lunged from the tree and slashed at Richard's arm. She sneered. So you know how to use fire magic in the woods to hide your tracks, huh? Too bad the client already predicted what you would do. They didn't just hire one assassin to take care of you. Richard's shoulder was bleeding non-stop. May casually tossed aside a wig and said, "You aren't getting away. We are on the outskirts of Deep Blue. Teleportation magic from out here will not be detected, and no one is coming to save you. You are surrounded." The scene shifted. Puvich stared calmly into the dark night. Loham spoke up. "We have been waiting months for this." Suddenly, a mystical circle appeared in midair, and a faint silhouette emerged. Joel called out, "Your Highness, you are back." Sue Helen stepped through the portal. Joel continued, "You have returned. Based on your old schedule, you are back much earlier than expected. Is there something important happening in Deep Blue?" She asked Popovich if his intelligence was actually reliable. He bowed and replied, "Reporting to the legendary mage, Your Highness, things are moving a bit faster than I anticipated, but overall, the report is accurate." Suddenly, Sue Helen called out, leaving Luke stunned. She ordered him to bring the law enforcement mages with him. The old man immediately complied. "As you wish, Your Highness." Sue Helen smirked, sensing an interesting anomaly forming around the academy. Under the glow of a full moon, a brutal battle raged in the forest. Richard's eyes burned with fury as his opponent's voice rang out. "Kid, you're surprisingly tough." She sneered. To think a mere mage apprentice could stand his ground against someone many times stronger than himself. With a sharp command, she sent another assassin charging forward, blade drawn. Richard was under constant fire. At this rate, he wouldn't have enough time to draw a magic circle to defend himself. Suddenly, he clenched his fist, and crimson threads erupted, snaring Luke. "Ugh, my body. I can't move," Luke grunted. Richard slammed a powerful punch into him as the soul threads tightened their grip. Seeing this, Anvu stood there, completely frozen. Taking advantage of them being bound by the soul threads, Richard quickly made his move. He unleashed a cloud of poison to cover his escape. But Anvu wasn't about to let him walk away. She was hot on his heels, thinking, how does a lowly mage student know assassination techniques like these? She swung her sword from behind him. Richard's vision began to blur as blood sprayed across the ground. Anvu shouted to her team, "Hurry, take the antidote our organization made. This brat's weapon is poisoned." Luke chimed in, "Those assassination moves, I've definitely heard of them somewhere before." Henry held up a vial of blood. "We've got enough. Mission accomplished. Leave him alive. We don't need any more trouble. Even if we're out of the surveillance zone, we're still on the edge of Deep Blue. We can't afford to be careless." Anvu nodded. "The mission is done, but you guys can head back. I'll take it from here." Luke frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Anvu smirked. Another client offered a much higher price for his life. Meanwhile, in a different location, Minnie snapped, "Are you insane, Stephen? Our goal was only to get Richard's blood to use as a catalyst for the curse later. That's all. But you paid extra to have him killed?" Minnie yelled. Stephen shrugged. "So what? I disguised myself as Aaron and successfully lured him away from Deep Blue's protection. This is the perfect chance to get rid of him. Why stop at just a little bit of blood?" Minnie was fuming. "You're so naive. Don't you know that everyone's movements in Deep Blue can be tracked through magic? Even if he was lured out of the city, the records of Richard's presence on the outer wall are still there. If he dies here and an investigation starts, they'll trace our presence back to that wall in no time." Stephen brushed her off. "Relax. I've already handled it. The body will be destroyed. By the time any magic tries to find him, it'll be too late. There won't be a single trace left. My philosophy is never to miss a chance to eliminate a problem. Minnie, your curse plan is just too slow and conservative. For the sake of my family's future, Richard has to go now." Deep inside Richard's mind, strange dark patches began to manifest. He was slumped over, head down, when a voice suddenly jolted him awake. "Richard!" A gentle moonlight bathed him. "You must live." The moon was full and bright, a silent command for him to survive. His eyes snapped open. "I understand." Richard bit down hard on his hand until it bled. The voice echoed again, "Offer your blood as a sacrifice." He reached out his hand. "Mother." Darkness began to consume his body, and he didn't care. He let the shadows take him. Back at the scene, Luke was livid. "This was supposed to be a joint mission. Don't you dare use us for your side hustle. Unless you're planning on sharing that bounty, you aren't laying a finger on him." Anvu burst out laughing. "Ha, a third-rate assassin like you thinks he can negotiate with me? Killing all three of you at once wouldn't even be a challenge." Luke felt a chill. "Blood Anvu. What are you doing?" Suddenly, Henry gasped. "Wait, the kid is behind you." Luke didn't understand what was happening and spun around. Right before his eyes, he saw his teammate being sliced apart by Richard. Anvu froze. What the hell? Her eyes widened in shock. He's radiating a shadow aura. Enraged, Henry charged. You brat! How dare you kill our leader? He lunged forward with blinding speed. Die! Richard simply raised his hand, and Henry's body was instantly shredded. Luke was paralyzed with fear. The sub-captain, too? In a flash, Richard was standing right in front of him. A sharp blade swung through the dark night. Anvu rushed in just in time, her sword clashing against Richard's to block the strike. She threw the vial of blood to her remaining comrade. Take the blood and get out of here, now. She could tell this wasn't going to be an easy fight. This power. What is this? She narrowed her eyes at Richard. He was truly dangerous. In the dead silence of the night, Anvu hides beneath the target's bed, her eyes cold with a murderous intent. Walking the razor's edge between life and death, she lunges forward, blade in hand. In her world, success isn't just a goal, it's survival. There is no room for failure, or you'll never know how close your next brush with death will be. This is the inescapable fate of an assassin. Anvu pivots, putting all her strength into a heavy strike at Richard. He dodges her attack with terrifying ease. Suddenly, two wings sprout from Richard's back as he manipulates the shadows to surround Anvu. She hurls her sword toward him, but that razor-sharp blade can't even scratch him. Anvu leaps high into the air, desperate to keep her distance. She catches her sword mid-air and dives straight for Richard's arm, but the wound she inflicts heals itself in an instant. Richard's eyes glow with a chilling, icy light. Anvu's eyes widen in shock, sweat pouring down her face. She launches a relentless barrage of attacks. Anvu leaps back again, trying to find a safe distance. Richard grips his injured arm tightly. When he pulls his hand away, the wound is gone, it has completely vanished. Anvu stands there, frozen. Is this the legendary power of darkness? She stares at Richard, realizing he is nothing more than a monster. Exhaling a plume of blue smoke, Richard lunges at her with blinding speed. Anvu swings her sword in a wide arc, but Richard twists his body to evade the blow. She grits her teeth, sweat dripping onto the blade. Richard extends his arm, controlling it to strike and shatter her sword into pieces. Anvu bites her lip. This was a weapon made of high-grade steel, yet she's been backed into a corner. Even if she has to break the taboo and gamble her very life, she has no choice but to return to her old ways. She activates the grafting assassination art. Suddenly, countless red birds appear out of nowhere. The sky is filled with the illusion of the blood parrot. The birds swarm around Richard in a chaotic frenzy. Anvu readies the chains in her hands. Get lost in my blood parrot illusion. She told herself she'd never use this technique again after leaving the grafting assassination guild. She wraps the chains tightly around Richard's neck. But to stay alive, her instinct to kill the target has completely taken over. Whether he's a monster or not, the head is always the weak point. But Richard twists his head all the way back, his glowing red eyes staring directly at Anvu. A blood-curdling scream echoes from deep within the forest. Stevenson wonders aloud. That scream was horrific. Did something happen to those assassins? Minnie shakes her head. No way. To be safe, I even hired a former member of the Grafting Assassination Guild. Failure isn't an option. Suddenly, they both freeze. They see a shadow emerging from the woods, slowly approaching them. Stevenson's heart sinks as he realizes who it is. It's the Enforcement Division mage,